The banquet hall fell silent. Lena's brain refused to process what had just happened. One second she'd been mortified, preparing to apologize and flee. The next, Rhett Calder's fingers were wrapped around her wrist like an iron manacle, and he'd just told an entire room of frontier aristocracy that she, Lena Whitmore, broke leatherworker, owner of exactly one decent dress and 3 pairs of work gloves, was his wife. "I'm sorry, what?" someone finally sputtered. Lena's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Rhett's grip tightened, not painfully, but firm enough to keep her from bolting. His face remained perfectly composed, that same cold mask she'd seen sketched in newspapers. Up close, he was even more intimidating than the stories suggested. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to calculate 3 moves ahead of everyone else. "You heard me correctly," Rhett said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the vaulted space. "This is Lena Calder, my wife." The woman in the emerald gown standing beside the stage looked like she'd been slapped. Her perfectly painted mouth twisted. "That's impossible. Rhett, we were literally about to announce your engagement to—" "Plans change, Eleanor." Rhett's tone could have frozen whiskey. "I apologize for the confusion, but the engagement you were expecting won't be happening. It seems my father arranged certain obligations before his death. Obligations I've now fulfilled through other means." Lena found her voice. It came out as a hoarse whisper. "What are you doing?" He didn't look at her. His attention remained fixed on the crowd, particularly on a silver-haired man near the front whose face had gone purple with rage. "Playing the only card I have left," Rhett murmured back. Then louder. "I know this comes as a surprise. My wife and I chose to keep our union private until the legal matters were resolved. But given tonight's circumstances, discretion no longer serves any purpose." "This is absurd." The purple-faced man stepped forward, his expensive boots clicking against the marble floor. "Marcus, surely you're not going to let this farce—" "Careful, Beaumont." Rhett's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're speaking about my wife." Beaumont. Lena's stomach lurched. Even she'd heard of the Beaumont family. Land barons who'd spent decades trying to absorb smaller ranches, always circling Calder Ridge like vultures waiting for weakness. Dorian Beaumont's eyes narrowed. He was older than Rhett, maybe 40, with the kind of polished cruelty that came from generations of money and power. "Your father signed contracts, Calder, legal documents that promised you'd get control if I didn't fulfill certain marriage conditions within a year of his death. Yes, I'm aware, I've fulfilled them." Rhett finally glanced down at Lena, and something flickered in his expression, maybe desperation, maybe calculation. 4 months ago, actually, which means those contracts are void. 4 months ago, Lena had been sleeping in the back room of a failing tannery, trying to figure out how to feed her younger siblings after their mother's fever had taken a bad turn. 4 months ago, she'd never heard of Rhett Calder beyond vague frontier gossip. "You're lying." Beaumont's voice cut like a blade. "Show me the marriage certificate." "Gladly. My lawyer has the documentation, filed properly with the county, signed by Judge Morrison himself." Rhett turned slightly, positioning himself between Lena and the crowd. "Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife and I have had a long journey. The travel from her family's ranch was exhausting." Her family's ranch. Right. The collapsing homestead 40 miles north where her father had drunk himself to death and left them nothing but debt. Eleanor, the woman in green who'd apparently expected to announce her own engagement tonight, let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, this is precious. Look at her, Rhett. She's terrified. She has no idea what you've done, does she?" Heat flooded Lena's face. She wanted to argue, to say something fierce and cutting, but Eleanor wasn't wrong. Lena was terrified. Nothing about this made sense. "We're leaving." Rhett's hand slid from her wrist to the small of her back, steering her toward a side door. "You can't just walk out?" Beaumont's voice rose. "This is fraud. I'll have lawyers. Then have them contact mine." Rhett pushed the door open, and suddenly they were in a dim hallway, away from the crystal and silk and hundreds of hostile stares. The door swung shut, muffling the explosion of voices behind it. Lena wrenched away from his touch. "What the hell was that?" Rhett leaned against the wall, and for the first time his composure cracked. He looked exhausted. "That was me buying time." "By telling everyone I'm your wife?" "Yes." "I've never met you before in my life." "I know." Lena's hands curled into fists. She'd dealt with plenty of entitled frontiermen, drunk cowboys who thought they could grab whatever they wanted. But this was different. This was calculated. So you just decided to drag a random woman into whatever mess you're not random. Rhett pushed off the wall, studying her with those cold, assessing eyes. You're Lena Whitmore, daughter of Robert Whitmore, who used to work my father's cattle drives before the drinking got bad. You've got 2 younger siblings, Emma and Caleb, and your mother died 3 weeks ago from fever. The air left Lena's lungs. You're broke, Rhett continued, his voice flat and factual. The bank's going to foreclose on your family homestead within the month. You came here tonight because someone told you I might be hiring leather workers for the ranch, and you're desperate enough to crash a private party for the chance at steady work. Lena's vision blurred. How do you... I know everything that happens within 100 miles of my land. It's how I survive. He tilted his head slightly. You walked through the wrong door. The service entrance was on the east side. I know that now. And yet here we are. Something that might have been dark amusement crossed his face. Funny how things work out. This isn't funny. This is... Lena struggled for words. You can't just claim someone's married to you. I can if I have the paperwork to prove it. She stared at him. You forged a marriage certificate. I prefer the term arranged in advance. Rhett crossed his arms. Judge Morrison is a friend. He owed me several favors. 4 months ago, when it became clear my father's contracts were going to destroy everything I've built, I asked him to file documentation for a marriage. I left the bride's name blank until I found the right candidate. And you picked me. Not initially. You were insurance. I had 3 other options lined up, but they all fell through. Family objections, better offers. One tried to blackmail me for more money. His jaw tightened. Then your mother died, and I heard you'd started asking around about work. Desperate, invisible, perfect timing. The words hit like fists. Desperate, invisible, perfect. I was going to approach you quietly, Rhett continued. Make an offer before the bank took everything. But then you walked through that door at exactly the right moment, and Beaumont was about to corner me on the marriage requirement in front of witnesses, and I had to make a choice. So you chose to ruin my life. I chose to save both our lives. Lena's laugh came out bitter and sharp. How exactly does this save me? Because I'm going to pay you. Rhett straightened, suddenly all business again. $100,000. Enough to save your homestead, pay off your father's debts, and set your siblings up comfortably for years. All you have to do is play the role of my wife for 1 year. After that, we quietly divorce, you take your money, and we go our separate ways. $100,000. Lena's knees went weak. That was more money than her entire family had seen in 3 generations. That was education for Emma and Caleb. That was medicine, food, a real chance at something better than constant survival. And if I say no, Rhett's expression didn't change. Then I'll find someone else, and you'll lose your home in 3 weeks. Your sister's 15, too young to work most jobs legally. Your brother's 12 and still recovering from the same fever that killed your mother. Where exactly will you take them when the bank seizes the property? Lena's vision went red. You son of a... I'm not threatening you. I'm being realistic. His voice remained maddeningly calm. You have no good options right now. I'm offering you one. By forcing me into a fake marriage. Yes. And if I get caught, if someone figures out we're lying, then we're both destroyed. Beaumont will take Calder Ridge. I'll lose everything my grandfather built, and you'll be prosecuted for fraud. Rhett's eyes glinted. So it's in both our interests to be very convincing. The hallway felt like it was closing in. Lena's mind raced through options, but they all ended the same way. Homeless, desperate, watching Emma and Caleb suffer. This is insane, she whispered. Yes. I don't know how to be a rancher's wife. You'll learn. Everyone in that room hates me already. They'll hate you more before this is over. Rhett took a step closer. But they'll also have to acknowledge you, accommodate you, and accept you as the Lady of Calder Ridge. Or they'll face me. Lena looked up at him, the stranger who'd just hijacked her entire existence. Why are you doing this? Why not just marry Eleanor or whoever else your father arranged? Something dark crossed Rhett's face. Because everyone my father chose wanted control. They wanted to own me, own the ranch, own everything. I watched him sell pieces of himself his entire life to maintain power, and I swore I'd never do the same. So instead you're buying me. I'm hiring you. He held her gaze. There's a difference. At the end of the year, you walk away with your money and your freedom. No strings, no ownership, just a business transaction. That lasts 365 days. 351, technically. We've already been married for 4 months, remember? Lena closed her eyes. Emma needed new boots before winter. Caleb needed medicine the local doctor couldn't afford to provide on credit. Their homestead needed repairs, seeds for spring planting, livestock to replace what they'd sold for food. 1 year. 1 year of lying, pretending, surviving in a world that would eat her alive, or watching her siblings starve. If I do this, she said slowly, I want the money held by a third party. Someone who'll pay me even if things go wrong. Rhett nodded. Done. Judge Morrison can arrange an escrow account. And I want it in writing that after the year you'll provide references, real ones that'll help me find legitimate work. Agreed. And I want my own room, with a lock. Something might have been approval flickered in his expression. The manor has 43 bedrooms. Take your pick. Lena opened her eyes. Rhett stood there watching her, this cold, calculating stranger who'd just offered her salvation wrapped in disaster. 1 year, she said, and then I'm gone. 1 year, he confirmed. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then footsteps echoed from the main hall, heavy, angry footsteps accompanied by raised voices. Rhett's mask slammed back into place. They're coming. We need to leave now, and we need to look united. Can you do that? Do I have a choice? Not anymore. The footsteps grew louder. Lena took a breath and squared her shoulders. She'd survived frontier winters, nursing her dying mother and her father's rages. She could survive this. Rhett offered his arm. Lena hesitated, then slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. His muscles tensed beneath her touch. One thing, she said quietly as the voices approached. If you ever lie to me again, about anything, this deal is over. I don't care what contracts you've signed. Fair enough. His voice dropped lower. Same goes for you. The door burst open. Beaumont appeared, flanked by 3 men in expensive suits. Behind them, Eleanor and a cluster of society matrons craned their necks to watch the confrontation. Calder! Beaumont's face had gone from purple to dangerously red. You think you can humiliate me? Humiliate this entire community with some obvious fraud and walk away? Rhett's expression could have been carved from stone. I think I'm going home with my wife. If you have legal objections, file them through proper channels. Oh, I will. Beaumont's smile turned vicious. I'll have lawyers crawling over every inch of this supposed marriage, and when they prove it's fake, I'll personally make sure both of you spend the next decade in prison. Lena felt Rhett's arm tighten under her hand, but his voice remained steady. Then you'd better hope your lawyers are very thorough, because mine are already prepared to defend against exactly this kind of harassment. Harassment, Eleanor laughed, sharp and cruel. Rhett, everyone here can see what's happening. You've dragged some desperate nobody into your schemes, and you expect us to just accept her name, Rhett cut in, his voice like ice, is Lena Calder. And yes, I expect you to accept it. Unless you'd prefer to challenge the legal standing of Judge Morrison's paperwork in court. I'm sure that'll go well for you. Beaumont's jaw worked. This isn't over. No, Rhett agreed. It's just beginning. But for tonight, we're done. He started forward, and the crowd parted. Not out of respect, but something closer to shock. Lena walked beside him, feeling hundreds of eyes track their movement. Whispers erupted in their wake, angry and speculative. She kept her chin up, her expression neutral, even though her heart hammered against her ribs. They emerged into the cold night air. A black carriage waited at the bottom of the stairs, driver already in position. Rhett handed her up, then climbed in beside her. The door shut with a decisive click. The carriage lurched into motion. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lena stared out the window at the darkness, watching the lights of the banquet hall recede. That, she finally said, was the worst introduction to society I've ever had. Rhett let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Yes? They're going to make my life hell. Yes. Beaumont's going to investigate everything. Absolutely. Lena turned to look at him. In the dim carriage light, he looked less like the cold ranch king and more like someone who'd just bet everything on a single card. Are we actually going to pull this off? Rhett met her eyes. I don't know, but we don't have a choice except to try. The carriage rolled on through the darkness, carrying them toward Calder Ridge Ranch and whatever disaster waited there. Lena closed her eyes and wondered if she'd just made the stupidest decision of her life. Probably. But at least Emma and Caleb would eat this winter. The ride to Calder Ridge took 2 hours. Lena spent most of it staring out the window, trying to process the fact that her entire life had just been demolished and rebuilt in the span of 20 minutes. Rhett remained silent beside her, occasionally checking a pocket watch that looked like it cost more than her family's entire homestead. His face gave away nothing. So, Lena finally said, because the silence was suffocating, what happens when we get there? I'll show you to your room. Tomorrow, Margaret, the head of household, will help you settle in and explain the staff situation. He didn't look at her. You'll need new clothes. Margaret can arrange that too. I have clothes. Not for this. Now he did glance over, taking in her worn coat and simple dress. You'll be attending social functions, dinners, county meetings. You need to look the part. The part of your wife. Yes. Lena's jaw tightened. And what exactly does that involve, besides wearing expensive dresses and letting people insult me? Learning to navigate frontier politics. Understanding who holds power and why. Convincing everyone that our marriage is real enough that Beaumont's lawyers can't find cracks. Rhett's voice remained matter of fact. It's not complicated, just exhausting. Great. You'll also need to learn about the ranch operations. If anyone asks what you do all day, you should have answers. I know leather work. I could... No. His tone turned sharp. Calder Ridge employs 47 people. We run cattle, horses, some agriculture. We're the largest operation in 3 counties. My wife doesn't work the tannery. Heat flooded Lena's face. So I'm just supposed to sit around being decorative? You're supposed to manage the household, organize social events, and present a united front with me against people who want us destroyed. That's not decorative. That's strategic. He finally looked at her fully. If you want to do leather work in your spare time, fine. But it can't be your public role. Do you understand? Lena understood perfectly. She was a prop, a game piece, a convenient solution to his problem. 1 year, she muttered. 1 year, he agreed. The carriage turned onto a long drive lined with cottonwood trees. Even in the darkness, Lena could make out the scale of what lay ahead. Massive barn structures, fenced pastures stretching into the distance. And at the end of the drive, a house that looked more like a fortress. Calder Ridge Manor rose 3 stories tall, built from dark stone and timber. Light glowed from several windows. As they drew closer, Lena could make out architectural details. Wide porches, ornate railings, a tower room on the north corner. It looked like something from a storybook, the kind of place desperate girls dreamed about while mending their 3rd pair of boots. This is home, Rhett said flatly. The carriage stopped. A man in servant's livery appeared immediately to open the door. Rhett climbed out first, then offered his hand to help Lena down. She took it, hyper-aware that the servant was watching, assessing. The moment her boots touched ground, Rhett's hand moved to her lower back again, that same proprietary gesture from the banquet hall. Thomas, this is my wife, Lena. She'll be living here permanently. Rhett's voice carried the kind of casual authority that expected instant obedience. Please inform Margaret that Mrs. Calder will need the blue suite prepared tonight. Thomas's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Lena caught the split second of surprise. Of course, sir. Welcome home, Mrs. Calder. The title felt wrong in her mouth, but Lena managed a nod. Thank you. They walked up wide stone steps to a massive front door. Rhett pushed it open without ceremony, and Lena stepped into a world she'd only glimpsed through windows. The entrance hall soared 2 stories high. A chandelier dripping with crystals hung from the ceiling. Dark wood paneling covered the walls, decorated with oil paintings of severe-looking men and women, Calder ancestors, presumably. A grand staircase swept upward, splitting into 2 directions at a landing. It smelled like wood polish and old money. This way. Rhett headed for the stairs without waiting to see if she'd follow. Lena hurried after him, her boots clicking against marble floors. They climbed to the 2nd floor, then down a hallway lined with closed doors. Rhett stopped at one near the end. The blue suite. 3 rooms. Bedroom, sitting area, private bath. Margaret will stock it with whatever you need. He pushed the door open, revealing a space larger than the entire main room of Lena's family homestead. The bedroom was decorated in shades of blue and cream, dominated by a four-poster bed that could have slept four people comfortably. A wardrobe stood against one wall, a writing desk against another. Through an open doorway, Lena glimpsed a sitting room with a fireplace and velvet furniture. My rooms are on the third floor, Rhett continued. We'll maintain separate quarters. Less complicated that way. Right. Lena stepped inside, feeling like an intruder. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, we start convincing everyone this is real. He leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion creeping back into his expression. Get some sleep. Margaret will wake you at 7 with breakfast. Wait. Lena turned to face him. You said people are going to investigate us. What exactly are they looking for? Proof we don't know each other. Proof the marriage is staged. Proof I'm trying to circumvent my father's contracts through fraud. Rhett's voice went cold. They'll interview servants, check financial records, watch how we interact. They'll look for any crack in the story. So we need to have our story straight. Yes. Then tell me yours. Where did we meet? How long have we known each other? What made you propose? Lena crossed her arms. I can't lie convincingly if I don't know what I'm lying about. Rhett studied her for a moment, something calculating in his gaze. Then he pushed off the doorframe and stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. We met 8 months ago, he said. You were doing leather repair work for one of the ranch hands, fixing saddles, bridles. I happened to be in the workshop when you came by with a delivery. We talked. About what? Leather quality. You were opinionated. I was impressed. His mouth quirked slightly. We started seeing each other quietly. Your father had just died. Your family was struggling. You were proud. Didn't want anyone thinking you were using me for money. But I was. But you were, he agreed. I was dealing with my father's death and the legal nightmare he'd left behind. We both needed something the other could provide. So 4 months ago, we married quietly at the courthouse. Judge Morrison, 2 witnesses, minimal paperwork. And we kept it secret because my father's contract specified that I needed to marry within a certain social circle. Someone with land, connections, breeding. Rhett's voice went bitter. You had none of those things. I knew announcing our marriage would cause problems, so we waited until I'd figured out how to break the other arrangements. It was a decent story, simple enough to remember, complex enough to be believable. What about affection? Lena asked. How do I act around you? Reserved in public. We're not a demonstrative couple, but supportive. You're my partner. I'm yours. Anyone who insults one of us insults both. He paused. Physical touch is minimal but present. I might touch your back, take your arm. You might adjust my collar, hand me a drink. Small gestures that suggest familiarity. Nothing more? Not unless absolutely necessary. Relief and something else, maybe disappointment, maybe just exhaustion, washed through Lena. Fine. Anything else I need to know? Don't volunteer information. Answer questions directly but briefly. If someone asks something you don't know how to answer, deflect or say you'd prefer not to discuss private matters. Most people will respect that. And the ones who don't? Let me handle them. Rhett moved back toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. He left before Lena could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. Lena stood alone in the massive blue bedroom, surrounded by luxury she'd never imagined inhabiting. Through the window, she could see the dark outline of ranch buildings, the distant mountains silhouetted against the night sky. 1 year, 351 days. She could do this. She'd survived worse. Lena sank onto the edge of the enormous bed and let herself shake for exactly 2 minutes. Then she stood up, unpacked her single bag of belongings, and started planning how to survive a world that had already decided to destroy her. Margaret appeared at 7 the next morning, exactly as Rhett had promised. She was a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She knocked once, then entered carrying a breakfast tray. Mrs. Calder. Her voice was crisp but not unkind. Mr. Calder asked me to help you settle in. I've brought eggs, toast, and coffee to start. Lena, who'd barely slept, sat up in bed feeling rumpled and out of place. Thank you. And please, just call me Lena. Margaret's expression didn't change. I'll call you Mrs. Calder, ma'am. It's proper. She set the tray on a side table. After breakfast, we'll discuss your schedule and responsibilities. Mr. Calder has morning meetings, but he's asked that you join him for lunch in the main dining room. Right. Of course. Lena pushed hair out of her face. Margaret, can I ask you something? Yes, ma'am. How much do you know about all this? Margaret met her eyes directly. I know Mr. Calder married you 4 months ago without telling anyone. I know last night's banquet was a disaster, and I know Dorian Beaumont is going to make life as difficult as possible for both of you going forward. So you know it's a mess. Life at Calder Ridge is always a mess, Mrs. Calder. The question is whether you're strong enough to survive it. Margaret moved to the wardrobe and began pulling out dresses. These were ordered last week. Mr. Calder had your measurements sent over from the dressmaker you used in town. Last week, before he'd claimed her at the banquet, meaning Rhett had been planning this for a while, watching her, gathering information, preparing for exactly this scenario. The thought sent cold fingers down Lena's spine. He's very thorough, she said carefully. He's a survivor. Margaret laid out a deep green dress. His father was a brutal man who ran this ranch through fear and control. Rhett learned early that preparation prevents disaster. Some people find that calculating. I find it practical. Lena ate breakfast while Margaret explained the household structure. 47 ranch employees, 12 household staff, complex social obligations that required constant navigation. She talked about dinner parties, charity events, county council meetings where Lena would be expected to appear at Rhett's side. It was overwhelming. By the time Lena dressed and made her way downstairs for lunch, her head spun with names, rules, and social landmines she hadn't known existed. The dining room was smaller than she'd expected. Intimate, almost. A table that could seat 12, currently set for 2 at one end. Rhett already sat there, reviewing papers. He looked up when she entered. Lena. Rhett. They stared at each other awkwardly, then Rhett gestured to the chair beside his. Sit. We need to talk. Lena sat, hyper-aware that servants were probably listening from the kitchen. Beaumont filed paperwork this morning challenging our marriage, Rhett said without preamble. His lawyers are requesting a full investigation, financial records, witness testimonies, the works. That was fast. He doesn't waste time. Rhett set down his papers. Which means we need to accelerate our timeline. There's a county social tomorrow night, spring benefit for the local school. We'll attend together. Very public, very visible. Lena's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? Yes. Margaret will help you prepare. His eyes searched her face. Can you do this? Do I have a choice? Not really. A servant appeared with plates, roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread that smelled like heaven. Lena's stomach growled despite her nerves. They ate in tense silence for several minutes. Then Rhett spoke again. I talked to Judge Morrison this morning. Your escrow account is set up. Half the money gets deposited now, half when the year ends successfully. Lena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Half now? 50,000. Enough to save your homestead immediately and provide security. The rest comes later. He took a drink of water. I've also arranged for a monthly stipend to be sent to your siblings under Margaret's supervision. Food, medicine, school supplies, whatever they need. Something in Lena's chest loosened slightly. Thank you. It's part of our arrangement. Still, thank you. Rhett nodded. They continued eating. Outside the window, Lena could see ranch hands moving between buildings, horses in the distance. Normal life continuing while hers spun completely out of control. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Maybe. Why did your father set up those contracts? Why force you to marry specific people? Rhett's jaw tightened. Control. He wanted to make sure that even after he died, the ranch would run according to his vision. He picked women from powerful families, women whose fathers would have influence over ranch operations. He set down his fork. I would have married Eleanor Hastings if I'd followed his plan. Her father owns the second largest cattle operation in the territory. Together, they would have controlled every major decision I made. So you chose me instead. I chose freedom. His eyes met hers, sharp and intense. I'd rather risk everything with a stranger who'll leave at the end of the year than spend my life under someone else's thumb. At least with you, I know exactly where I stand. It should have been insulting. Instead, it felt honest. Same, Lena said quietly. Something passed between them, not warmth exactly, but understanding. They were both trapped, both gambling, both trying to survive forces bigger than themselves. The moment broke when Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Calder, your 1 o'clock meeting is here." Rhett stood. "I'll be in my study until dinner. Lena, Margaret will continue your orientation." He paused. "Tomorrow night is important. Everything depends on how convincing we are." "I understand." He left. Lena sat alone at the massive dining table, surrounded by luxury and suffocating expectations, and wondered how long she could keep pretending before something broke. The answer came sooner than she expected. The county social started at 7. By 6:30, Lena was ready to crawl out of her own skin. Margaret had spent the entire afternoon transforming her into something unrecognizable. The dress was midnight blue silk that cost more than Lena had earned in a year of leatherwork. Her hair had been pinned and curled into an elaborate style that required 20 minutes and enough pins to build a small weapon. The shoes pinched. "Stop fidgeting," Margaret said, adjusting a final curl. "You look like a proper rancher's wife." Lena stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back seemed like a stranger, polished, elegant, completely out of her depth. "I look like I'm playing dress-up." "Everyone's playing dress-up, Mrs. Calder. The trick is pretending you're not." Margaret stepped back, examining her work critically. "Mr. Calder is waiting downstairs." Lena took a breath and headed for the door, trying not to trip over the dress hem. The hallway felt longer than usual, the stairs steeper. When she reached the entrance hall, Rhett stood near the front door wearing a black suit that probably cost enough to feed a family for 6 months. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe approval, gone too quickly to identify. "You look appropriate," he said. "Thanks. You too." They stared at each other. Then Rhett offered his arm, and Lena took it, and they walked out into the evening like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The carriage ride into town was silent, except for the rhythm of hooves on packed dirt. Lena watched darkness gather over the mountains while Rhett reviewed what felt like a mental checklist. "The Harrisons will be there," he said finally. "Thomas and Sarah. They own the lumber mill. Sarah gossips, but Thomas is reasonable. Be polite, but not overly friendly." "Okay." "The Suttons. Ignore them if possible. They're Beaumont allies. Anything you say will be twisted and reported back." He paused. "Judge Morrison will be there with his wife. You can trust them. If things get uncomfortable, stay near them." "And Eleanor Hastings?" "Will absolutely be there." Rhett's voice went flat. "She'll try to humiliate you. Don't take the bait." "What if she succeeds?" "Then we leave early and deal with the fallout." He finally looked at her. "But I'd prefer you didn't let her succeed." Lena's jaw tightened. "I'll do my best." They arrived at the community hall just after 7. Light blazed from every window, and carriages lined the street. Music drifted out, a string quartet playing something elegant and unfamiliar. Rhett helped her down, his hand firm on hers. Then that proprietary touch returned to her lower back as they climbed the steps. "Remember," he murmured, "we're united. Whatever happens, we're together." "Right." The doors opened and they walked into a wall of stairs. The hall was packed, easily 200 people dressed in their finest, all of whom turned to watch Lena and Rhett's entrance. Conversations died. The quartet faltered for a beat before recovering. Eleanor Hastings stood near the refreshment table in a dress that probably cost more than Lena's entire wardrobe. Her smile was pure venom. "Well," she said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence, "look who decided to grace us with their presence. The happy couple." Rhett's hand tightened slightly against Lena's back. "Eleanor, you look well." "I look devastated, actually." Eleanor glided closer, her emerald skirts rustling. "Finding out the man I was supposed to marry had secretly wed some nobody really took its toll." Several people nearby made interested noises. Lena felt heat creep up her neck. "Her name is Lana," Rhett said quietly. "And she's not a nobody. She's my wife." "Oh, we've all heard about the mysterious marriage. 4 months ago, apparently. How romantic." Eleanor's eyes raked over Lena like she was evaluating livestock. "Though I must say, Rhett, your taste has certainly changed." "My taste has always been excellent," Rhett replied. "I just prioritize different qualities than you might expect." "Such as?" "Honesty, loyalty, the ability to work hard without expecting everything handed to her on a silver platter." The barb landed. Eleanor's smile turned brittle. How provincial. I suppose that's what happens when you marry beneath your station. Lena's fingernails dug into her palms. Every instinct screamed to snap back to defend herself, but Rhett had warned her about this. Don't take the bait. Excuse us, Rhett said, already steering Lena away. We should greet Judge Morrison. They moved through the crowd and Lena could feel eyes tracking them, whispers erupting in their wake. Her face burned. Breathe, Rhett murmured. You're doing fine. She just called me a nobody to my face. Yes, and you didn't respond, which makes you look composed and her look petty. He guided her toward an older couple near the windows. That's the right approach. Judge Morrison was a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. His wife, Catherine, smiled warmly and immediately drew Lena into conversation about the spring weather and garden plans, safe, neutral topics that let Lena's heart rate slowly return to normal. Don't mind Eleanor, Catherine said quietly. She's been insufferable since the engagement fell through. Most people see right through her. Most people seem to agree with her, Lena said. The loudest people aren't most people. Catherine patted her arm. Give it time. Let them see who you really are. Lena wanted to laugh. Who she really was. A broke leather worker playing the most dangerous con of her life. The evening progressed like walking through a minefield. Rhett introduced her to dozens of people whose names blurred together. Some were polite. Some were openly hostile. A few seemed genuinely curious. Thomas Harrison, the lumber mill owner, shook her hand firmly. Heard you're from the Whitmore homestead north of here. Your father worked cattle drives with my brother back in the day. Yes, sir. Lena grasped at the familiar ground. He talked about those drives sometimes. Robert was a good man before the drinking got bad. Thomas's expression turned sympathetic. Sorry about your mother. Fever's brutal. Thank you. His wife Sarah jumped in immediately. So the wedding was 4 months ago? Where did you have the ceremony? There it was, the first real test. County courthouse, Lena said, keeping her voice steady. Just Judge Morrison, 2 witnesses, and paperwork. Nothing fancy. How romantic, Sarah said, in a tone that suggested she found it anything but. And you kept it secret all this time? We had our reasons. I'm sure you did. Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. Must have been quite a surprise when Rhett announced it at the banquet. Rhett appeared at Lena's elbow, 2 glasses of wine in hand. The surprise was necessary given the circumstances. My father's contracts left us with limited options for timing. He handed Lena a glass, and she took it gratefully. The wine was better than anything she'd tasted before, smooth and rich. She sipped it slowly, trying to look like she drank expensive wine every day. Sarah opened her mouth to ask another question, but Thomas cut her off. Well, congratulations to you both. Calder Ridge is lucky to have new leadership. Your father ran things too harsh for too long. Thank you, Rhett said. We're working on changing that. They moved on. The interrogation continued in different forms with different people. Where had they met? How long had they known each other? What did Lena's family think of the match? Why had they hidden it? Lena stuck to the story they'd prepared, keeping answers brief and consistent. Rhett stayed close, running interference when questions got too pointed. But Eleanor wasn't done. She appeared again near the dance floor as the quartet shifted to a waltz. Rhett, you must dance with your bride. Everyone's dying to see how well you move together. It was a trap. Lena could see it in Eleanor's triumphant expression. If they danced well, it suggested rehearsal, proof they'd been secretly together. If they danced poorly, it suggested they barely knew each other. We'd be delighted, Rhett said smoothly. He set down his wine glass and offered Lena his hand. Mrs. Calder? Lena's throat went dry. I should mention I don't really know how to... Follow my lead. They walked onto the floor. Other couples made space, forming a circle around them. Lena wanted to melt into the floorboards. Rhett's hand settled on her waist. His other hand took hers. Put your left hand on my shoulder. When I step forward, you step back. Trust me. Easy for you to say, Lena whispered. The music started. Rhett moved, and Lena stumbled after him, trying desperately to follow his lead. She stepped on his foot twice in the first minute. Sorry, she hissed. Stop apologizing and feel the rhythm. His voice was low, only for her. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You're overthinking it. Everyone's staring. Let them stare. His hand tightened slightly on her waist. We're married, remember? We've done this before. Act like it. Lena forced herself to breathe, to focus on the pressure of his hand guiding her. Gradually, something clicked. Her feet found the rhythm. They moved together less awkwardly, more in sync. Better, Rhett murmured. Don't get used to it. His mouth quirked, almost a smile. Wouldn't dream of it. They finished the dance without major disaster. Polite applause rippled through the watching crowd, though Lena caught more than a few skeptical expressions. Eleanor appeared the moment they stepped off the floor. How sweet. Though I must say, for a couple married 4 months, you dance like strangers. We don't dance often, Rhett said. Ranch life doesn't leave much time for social activities. Clearly, Eleanor turned her attention to Lena. So tell me, Mrs. Calder, what exactly did you do before marrying into all this wealth? I heard something about leatherwork. The way she said it made leatherwork sound like prostitution. I did saddle repair and custom work, Lena said evenly. Good leatherwork is skilled labor. Not everyone can do it well. How industrious. I'm sure Rhett finds that very quaint. Eleanor's smile sharpened. Must be quite an adjustment, going from manual labor to managing a household staff. I'm learning. I'm sure you are. Though one wonders what you bring to the marriage beyond your charming work ethic. Eleanor leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough that only Lena and Rhett could hear. Everyone knows Rhett needed a wife to escape his father's contracts. Everyone knows you needed money. It's all very transactional, isn't it? Lena's fingernails bit into her palms. Don't take the bait. Don't take the bait. What I bring to this marriage, she said carefully, is none of your concern, Eleanor. Oh, but it is everyone's concern. Rhett's choices affect the entire county. If he's made a mistake, he hasn't. The words came out harder than Lena intended. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Defensive. How telling. Rhett stepped between them, his expression glacial. This conversation is over. Is it? Because I think people deserve to know the truth about this sudden, convenient marriage. Eleanor raised her voice slightly, drawing attention from nearby groups. 4 months of secrecy, a surprise announcement right when Rhett needed to fulfill his father's requirements. It's all very suspicious. What's suspicious? Rhett said coldly, is your inability to accept reality. Lena and I are married. Legally, permanently, with proper documentation. Your personal feelings about that don't change the facts. Legal doesn't mean legitimate. Careful, Eleanor. Rhett's voice dropped to something dangerous. You're accusing a judge of fraud. That's a serious allegation. Color rose in Eleanor's cheeks. Around them, conversations had stopped again. Everyone was watching. Judge Morrison appeared at Rhett's shoulder. Is there a problem? No problem, Eleanor said quickly. Just friendly conversation. Didn't sound friendly. Morrison's expression was stern. Miss Hastings, I personally oversaw the Calder's marriage documentation. If you're suggesting impropriety, I suggest you hire a lawyer and make your accusations formally rather than spreading gossip at a community function. Eleanor's mouth compressed into a thin line. I wasn't suggesting. Yes, you were, and it's unbecoming. Morrison turned to Lena. Mrs. Calder, would you care to get some air? It's gotten rather stuffy in here. Lena nodded gratefully. Rhett took her arm, and they followed Morrison toward the side doors, leaving Eleanor standing alone in a circle of uncomfortable observers. Outside, the cool evening air felt like salvation. Lena leaned against the building wall and closed her eyes. That was a disaster, she said. That was expected, Morrison corrected. Eleanor's been stirring up trouble for 2 days. Everyone knew she'd make a scene tonight. She basically accused us of fraud in front of half the county. And I shut her down in front of half the county. Morrison pulled out a pipe and tobacco pouch. Sometimes the best defense is letting your enemies discredit themselves through their own behavior. Rhett stood nearby, hands in his pockets, staring out at the dark street. She's going to escalate. This was just the opening salvo. Probably. Morrison lit his pipe, the tobacco glowing orange. But you handled it correctly, both of you. You stayed united, didn't lose your temper, and made her look petty. He glanced at Lena. How are you holding up? I've been better, Lena admitted. I imagine so. This isn't an easy position you've been put in. His tone gentled slightly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing admirably under the circumstances. You mean for someone who's lying to everyone? I mean for someone thrust into an impossible situation without preparation or support. Morrison took a long draw on his pipe. Rhett's father was a cruel bastard who tried to control his son from beyond the grave. You're helping break that control. That takes courage. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like desperation dressed up in expensive silk. The door behind them opened, and Catherine Morrison emerged. There you are. People are starting to leave. You should make a graceful exit before Eleanor corners you again. Good idea, Rhett said. He offered Lena his arm. Ready? Not really, but let's go anyway. They said their goodbyes to the Morrisons and headed for their carriage. The ride home was quieter than the ride there. Both of them drained from maintaining performance for 3 hours straight. You did well tonight, Rhett said finally. I stepped on your feet while dancing and nearly lost my temper with Eleanor. You kept your composure when she tried to provoke you. That's what matters. He looked out the window. She'll try again. Probably worse next time. I know. Can you handle it? Lena thought about Emma and Caleb back at the homestead, about the money already deposited in escrow, about having made it through one social event without completely falling apart. I can handle it, she said. Rhett nodded. They didn't speak again until the carriage pulled up to Calder Ridge Manor. Inside, the house was quiet, staff already retired for the night. Lena kicked off the torturous shoes the moment she reached her room and started pulling pins from her hair. Her scalp ached. Her feet ached. Everything ached. A knock at the door made her freeze. It's me, Rhett's voice came through the wood. Lena opened the door, still half-dressed, hair falling in tangled waves around her shoulders. Rhett stood in the hallway, jacket off, looking as exhausted as she felt. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing. I just wanted to... He stopped, seeming uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. You should know that tonight was harder than most events will be. Eleanor was particularly vicious because it's fresh. It'll get easier. Will it? No, but you'll get better at pretending it is. He leaned against the doorframe. I also wanted to thank you for not breaking under the pressure, for staying in character even when she was being cruel. It's what you're paying me for. Still, thank you. They stood there in awkward silence. Then Rhett straightened. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we have dinner with the Harrisons, something Margaret arranged before tonight's event. It'll be smaller, easier. Okay. He turned to leave, then paused. Lena? Yeah? You looked convincing tonight, as my wife. I know that's not comforting, but it's the truth. He walked away before she could respond, footsteps echoing down the hallway toward the stairs. Lena closed the door and leaned against it, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman looking back still seemed like a stranger. 349 days to go. The next morning brought news that made the county socials seem trivial by comparison. Margaret appeared during breakfast with a telegram, her expression grim. Mr. Calder asked me to give you this. Lena took the paper. The message was brief and brutal. Beaumont filed petition with territorial court. Stop requesting full investigation of marriage legitimacy. Stop hearing. Scheduled 3 weeks. Stop lawyer arriving tomorrow to prepare. Stop. Her coffee turned to ash in her mouth. Where's Rhett? She asked. In his study. He said you should join him when you finished eating. Lena abandoned her breakfast and headed for the study. She found Rhett surrounded by papers, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. We knew this was coming, he said without looking up. 3 weeks isn't much time. No. He finally met her eyes. My lawyer is Jacob Walsh, best in the territory. He'll arrive tomorrow and start preparing our defense. What kind of defense? Testimonies. Financial records proving we've been acting as a married couple. Witnesses who can confirm our relationship. Rhett set down his pen. And we need to make sure our story is airtight. Walsh will grill us on every detail. Any inconsistency gives Beaumont ammunition. Lena sank into a chair across from his desk. What happens if we lose? Beaumont gets Calder Ridge. I lose everything. And you get prosecuted for fraud. His voice remained steady, matter of fact. We don't have the option of losing. No pressure. None at all. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Tell me everything about your life before we supposedly met. Family history, where you lived, what you did every day. I need to know you as well as a husband would. They spent the next 4 hours going through details. Lena talked about her father's drinking, her mother's illness, the constant struggle to keep food on the table. She described the tannery work, the customers, the small workshop where she'd spent most of her waking hours. Rhett took notes, asked probing questions, memorized details. Then he shared his own history, the brutal childhood under his father's control, the years spent learning to run the ranch while being constantly criticized, the relief and terror when the old man finally died. He used to lock me in the cellar when I disagreed with him, Rhett said at one point, his voice distant, sometimes for days, said it would teach me discipline. Lena stared at him. That's not discipline. That's torture. He called it necessary preparation for leadership. Rhett's jaw tightened. He wanted me hard, unbreakable, unable to trust anyone or show weakness. Did it work? What do you think? Lena looked at the cold, calculating man across the desk and wondered what he might have been like without years of systematic cruelty. I think you survived. That's different than letting it work. Something flickered in Rhett's expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Thanks, I think. They continued working through lunch and into the afternoon. By dinner, Lena's head pounded with information overload. The Harrison dinner that evening was smaller, more intimate. Thomas and Sarah arrived promptly at 7, and Margaret served an elaborate meal that Lena barely tasted. Sarah Harrison talked about her garden, upcoming church social plans, county politics. Thomas discussed lumber prices and construction projects. Lena smiled, nodded, and tried to participate while her mind spun with everything Rhett had told her about the upcoming court case. You seem distracted, dear, Sarah said during dessert. Lena forced her attention back. Sorry. Just thinking about everything I need to learn about running the household. It's a lot to absorb. I'm sure Margaret's being helpful. Very. She's patient with all my questions. That's good. Sarah leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think it's wonderful that Rhett married someone practical. Eleanor Hastings is beautiful, but she's never worked a day in her life. You understand what real effort looks like. It was probably meant as a compliment. Lena tried to take it that way. Thomas cleared his throat. We heard about Beaumont's court petition. If there's anything we can do to help, character testimony, anything like that, you just ask. Rhett's expression remained neutral, but Lena caught the slight easing of tension in his shoulders. That's generous, Thomas. We may take you up on that. Please do. Your father made a lot of enemies with his methods. Some of us are hoping you'll run things differently. Thomas paused. And frankly, Beaumont's been trying to consolidate power for years. If he gets Calder Ridge, he'll control half the county's cattle and timber trade. That's not good for any of us. So it wasn't just about supporting Rhett. It was about preventing Beaumont from becoming too powerful. Lena filed that information away. Useful to know where alliances really stood. After the Harrisons left, Lena helped Margaret clear dishes despite protests that Mrs. Calder shouldn't be doing servants' work. I like keeping my hands busy, Lena said, carrying plates to the kitchen. Sitting still makes me anxious. Margaret gave her an appraising look. You're different from the usual society wives. Is that good or bad? Depends on who you ask. Margaret started washing dishes. But for what it's worth, I think Mr. Calder chose well. You've got spine. You'll need it. That night, Lena lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind refusing to shut down. 3 weeks until the hearing. 3 weeks to convince a court that she and Rhett were genuinely married and not just two desperate people using each other to survive, which was exactly what they were. She must have eventually slept because morning came with sunlight streaming through the windows and Margaret knocking to announce that Mr. Walsh had arrived early. Lena dressed quickly and found Rhett and his lawyer in the study. Jacob Walsh was a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who radiated competence. Mrs. Calder? He shook her hand firmly. We have a lot of work to do. That was an understatement. Walsh spent the next 5 days systematically dismantling and rebuilding every aspect of their story. He asked questions from every possible angle, looking for weaknesses. Where exactly had they first met? What had they talked about? When had casual conversation turned into courtship? Why keep the marriage secret? How often did they see each other during those 4 months? Lena and Rhett answered separately, then together. Walsh compared their responses, noted inconsistencies, made them practice until their stories aligned perfectly. You need to believe this yourselves, Walsh said on the 3rd day. The moment you hesitate or second guess, the court will see it. You can't sound rehearsed. You need to sound like two people recalling actual shared experiences. That's hard when the experiences didn't happen, Lena pointed out. Then create real experiences now. Build actual memories together that you can reference. Walsh closed his notebook. Go riding together. Have dinner in town where people can see you. Act like an actual married couple, not two people sharing a house. Rhett frowned. That's not part of our arrangement. Your arrangement doesn't matter if you lose in court. You'll both be destroyed. Walsh's voice turned sharp. I can defend the legal documentation. I can present financial evidence, but I can't manufacture genuine connection. That has to come from you. After Walsh left for the day, Rhett and Lena stood in the study, avoiding eye contact. He's right, Lena said finally. I know. So we need to spend more time together, build real memories. Yes. This is awkward. Extremely. Rhett ran a hand through his hair. But necessary. So tomorrow, we ride out to check the northern pastures together. Bring your questions about ranch operations. If anyone asks, I've been teaching you the business. They started the next morning before dawn. Rhett provided Lena with a sturdy mare and riding clothes that Margaret had acquired from somewhere. They rode out as the sun rose, painting the mountains gold and pink. The ranch was bigger than Lena had realized, thousands of acres stretching toward the foothills. Rhett showed her fence lines, water sources, grazing rotations. He explained breeding programs, market prices, seasonal patterns. His voice lost some of its cold edge when he talked about the land. This was what he actually cared about, Lena realized. Not the society games or power struggles, just the ranch itself. Your father really built all this? She asked as they paused on a ridge overlooking a valley filled with cattle. My grandfather started it. My father expanded it through ruthless business practices and strategic marriages. He didn't care who he crushed as long as the ranch grew. Rhett's voice turned bitter. I spent my whole childhood watching him destroy people, and now I'm fighting to keep the empire he built through cruelty. You could run it differently, Lena said. Make it something better than what he left behind. Maybe. He urged his horse forward. If I survive long enough. They rode for hours, stopping occasionally for Rhett to point out landmarks or explain operations. Ranch hands they encountered tipped their hats respectfully. To Rhett, definitely. To Lena, more uncertainly. They don't know what to make of me, Lena observed. Give them time. Most of them hated my father. If they think you're making me less like him, they'll come around. Am I? Making you less like him? Rhett considered the question. I don't know yet, but I'm not locking anyone in cellars, so that's progress. It was meant as a joke, but the darkness underneath made Lena's chest hurt. She thought about the child Rhett had been, trapped, terrified, systematically broken down by someone who should have protected him. No wonder he'd turned cold and calculating. It was survival. They returned to the manor at dusk, both of them saddle-sore and exhausted. Margaret had dinner waiting, something simple, just the two of them in the small dining room. This helps, Lena said, serving herself roasted vegetables. Having real things to talk about, actual experiences. Walsh is smart. Rhett poured wine. Manipulative, but smart. So are you. Is that a compliment or an accusation? Both. They ate in companionable silence. It struck Lena that this felt almost normal, two people sharing a meal and conversation after a long day. Not romantic exactly, but not hostile either. Just present. Can I ask you something personal? Lena said. Maybe. Have you ever actually been in love before all this? Rhett's hand paused halfway to his glass. Once. When I was 20. Her name was Caroline. His voice stayed carefully neutral. My father found out and made sure she married someone else. Someone with more land and better connections. I didn't try again after that. That's brutal. That was my father. He took a drink. What about you? There was a boy when I was 16, Michael. Worked his father's farm. Lena smiled at the memory. He used to bring me wildflowers and terrible poetry. Then my father got violent one night and Michael saw the bruises. He stopped coming around after that. Because he was scared of your father? Because he didn't want to deal with my messy life. Lena shrugged. Can't blame him, really. Who wants that kind of complication? Someone who actually cared wouldn't have seen it as complication. Yeah, well, he didn't care that much. They finished dinner and retreated to separate rooms, but something had shifted. The wall between them had thinned slightly. They were still playing roles, still lying to everyone, but maybe they were becoming something other than complete strangers in the process. The days blurred together after that. More coaching with Walsh, more social events where Lena and Rhett presented their united front, more carefully constructed memories and practiced stories. Lena met with the household staff to learn names and responsibilities. She helped Margaret plan menus for upcoming events. She spent hours in Rhett's study learning about ranch finances, not because she needed to, but because it gave them more shared knowledge to reference. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the county's hostility began to soften. Not Eleanor's, she remained openly antagonistic, but others started accepting Lena's presence, or at least stopped actively trying to destroy her at every social function. "You're getting better at this," Judge Morrison told her at a Sunday afternoon gathering. "More confident, less like you're waiting for permission to exist." "I'm learning," Lena said. "Good, because the hearing's in 1 week. It's going to be rough." The reminder sent ice through Lena's stomach. 1 week. 7 days until everything hung on her ability to convince a courtroom full of skeptics that she and Rhett were genuinely married. That night, she found Rhett in the library, surrounded by legal documents. "Can't sleep?" she asked from the doorway. "No. You?" "No." Lena entered and sat in the chair across from his. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." "That's not comforting." "It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be true." Rhett set down his papers. "We've prepared as well as we can. Walsh thinks we have a solid case. The documentation is legitimate. Our testimonies align. We have character witnesses." But Beaumont's lawyers will try to break us anyway. They'll look for emotional cracks, inconsistencies in how we interact, proof that we don't actually know each other as intimately as married couples should. He met her eyes. They'll ask personal questions, uncomfortable questions, things we haven't practiced. Like what? Like details about our supposedly private life together, habits, preferences, the kind of things you only know from extended close contact. Lena's face heated. "We can't fake that." "No, but we can build some real knowledge now." Rhett stood. "Come on." "Where?" "My rooms. If we're supposedly sharing a life, you need to actually see where I spend most of my time." Lena followed him up the stairs to the 3rd floor. His suite was larger than hers. A bedroom connected to a sitting room with a large desk, bookshelves lining the walls, and a balcony overlooking the eastern pastures. "This is where I work most nights," Rhett said, gesturing to the desk covered in papers. "I prefer it to the downstairs study because fewer people interrupt. I keep whiskey in the bottom drawer. I read before bed, mostly technical manuals and financial reports, occasionally poetry, though I deny that publicly." Lena wandered the room, taking in details. A chess set on a side table, pieces arranged mid-game. Leather riding gloves on the mantel. Books stacked everywhere, most with worn spines suggesting repeated reading. "You're tidier than I expected," she said. "Habit from childhood. My father inspected my room daily. Anything out of place meant punishment." Rhett opened a wardrobe. "I wear mostly dark colors. Easier to maintain, and they don't show dirt when I'm working with the cattle. I hate cravats but wear them at formal events because it's expected." "You're giving me ammunition for the hearing. That's the point." He gestured toward the doorway connecting to the bedroom. "That room is private. You don't need to see it. But know that I wake early, usually before dawn. I don't eat breakfast until after checking on the morning operations. And I can't stand coffee but drink it anyway because it's what ranch owners are supposed to do." Lena absorbed the information, adding it to the mental file she'd been building. "Okay, my turn." They went back to her suite. Lena showed him her space, the sitting room where she practiced leatherwork when she couldn't sleep, the books Margaret had provided about frontier history and ranch management, the single photograph of Emma and Caleb that she kept on the nightstand. "I hate the pins and formal hairstyles," she said. "They give me headaches. I prefer working with my hands to sitting idle. It's why I help Margaret sometimes, even though I'm not supposed to. And I can't stand the taste of oysters, which seem to show up at every fancy dinner." "Noted." Rhett examined the leather pieces on her work table. "These are good. Better than the usual ranch repair work." "Thanks. It's the only thing I'm actually skilled at." "That's not true. You're skilled at survival. That's rarer than you think." They stood in the dim sitting room, surrounded by the accumulated details of each other's lives, and something unspoken passed between them. Not attraction exactly, or maybe it was, buried under layers of necessity and exhaustion, but recognition, at least. A sense of seeing each other as more than just pieces in a desperate game. "We should sleep," Rhett said finally. Long day tomorrow. Yeah, he left, and Lena prepared for bed mechanically, her mind spinning. 6 more days until the hearing. 6 more days to perfect the performance of her life. She just hoped it would be enough. The morning of the hearing arrived cold and gray, with clouds threatening rain. Lena stood in front of her mirror while Margaret fastened the buttons on a charcoal dress that managed to look both respectable and severe. "You look strong," Margaret said. "That's what matters today." Lena's hands trembled slightly. "I don't feel strong." "No one does before a battle, but you'll fight anyway." Margaret stepped back, examining her work. "Mr. Calder is waiting downstairs." Rhett stood in the entrance hall wearing a black suit that made him look like he was attending a funeral. Maybe he was. The funeral of everything they'd built over the past weeks. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." The courthouse was an imposing stone building in the center of town. By the time their carriage arrived, a crowd had already gathered, curiosity seekers, supporters, enemies. Lena spotted Eleanor Hastings near the front steps, wearing pearls and a smile that promised blood. Walsh met them at the entrance. "Remember everything we discussed. Answer questions directly, but don't volunteer extra information. If you don't know something, say so rather than guessing. And whatever happens, stay calm." "Easier said than done," Lena muttered. "Yes, but necessary." Walsh led them through the crowd and into the courthouse. The courtroom was packed. Judge Morrison sat at the bench looking grim. Beaumont and his legal team occupied one table, all expensive suits and predatory confidence. Walsh directed Lena and Rhett to the opposite table. Lena's stomach churned. She'd never been in a courtroom before. The formal atmosphere, the watching eyes, the weight of everything depending on what happened in the next few hours. It pressed down like a physical force. Morrison called the hearing to order. Beaumont's lead lawyer, a silver-haired man named Pritchard, stood immediately. "Your Honor, we're here today because Rhett Calder has attempted to circumvent legitimate legal contracts through a fraudulent marriage. The evidence will show that this union is nothing more than a desperate scheme to avoid his father's explicit wishes and obligations." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Pritchard," Morrison said. "I hope you have substantial evidence." "We do, Your Honor. We'll demonstrate that Mr. Calder and the woman claiming to be his wife barely knew each other before their supposed marriage, that their relationship lacks the genuine emotional and physical intimacy expected of a legitimate union, and that the timing of this marriage's sudden revelation is far too convenient to be coincidental." Pritchard called his first witness, Eleanor Hastings. She took the stand looking like injured innocence wrapped in silk. "Miss Hastings, you were engaged to Mr. Calder, were you not?" "Not formally engaged, but there was an understanding. Our families had discussed the arrangement for months. Rhett and I had spent considerable time together." Eleanor's voice carried perfectly across the courtroom. Then suddenly, at what was supposed to be our engagement announcement, he claimed he'd secretly married some woman no one had ever heard of. "Did Mr. Calder ever mention this woman to you during your courtship?" "Never. Not once." "Did he seem like a man in love? Someone eager to be with his wife?" "No. He seemed like someone trapped by his father's contracts looking for any escape route possible." Eleanor leaned forward. "I know Rhett. We grew up in the same social circles. He's calculated and strategic. This marriage has strategy written all over it." Walsh stood for cross-examination. "Miss Hastings, isn't it true that you stood to gain considerable control over Calder Ridge through your proposed marriage to Mr. Calder?" Eleanor's expression tightened. "That's not why—" "Yes or no, please. Would your family have had influence over ranch operations?" "My father has experience that would have been valuable, so yes." "And isn't it possible that you're simply angry Mr. Calder chose a different path? One that didn't involve surrendering control of his family's legacy? That's not what this is about, isn't it?" Walsh let the question hang. No further questions. Eleanor stepped down, shooting Lena a look of pure venom as she passed. Pritchard called several more witnesses, society matrons who testified that they'd never seen Rhett and Lena together before the banquet, business associates who claimed Rhett had never mentioned a wife, staff members who reported that the couple maintained separate bedrooms. Each testimony chipped away at their story. Lena felt Rhett's tension increasing beside her, his jaw tight, hands clenched under the table. Then Pritchard called a private investigator named Collins, who'd been digging into their background. "Mr. Collins, what did your investigation reveal about the supposed relationship between Mr. Calder and Miss Whitmore?" Collins pulled out a notebook. I found no evidence of any contact between them prior to 4 months ago. No letters, no witnesses placing them together, no purchases or activities suggesting courtship. Miss Whitmore was barely surviving on frontier work during that period. Mr. Calder was managing his ranch and navigating his father's death. Their social circles never overlapped. What about after the supposed marriage? They've been carefully constructing the appearance of a relationship, riding together, attending events, but it looks rehearsed, practiced, like two actors learning their roles. And their living situation? Separate bedrooms on different floors. Staff reports minimal interaction beyond what's necessary for public appearances. Collins closed his notebook. In my professional opinion, this is a marriage of convenience designed to circumvent legal obligations, nothing more. Walsh's cross-examination focused on the lack of definitive proof, but the damage was done. The investigator's testimony painted them exactly as they were. Two people faking intimacy for strategic purposes. During a brief recess, Lena escaped to the hallway. She leaned against the wall, trying to breathe through mounting panic. "We're losing," she said when Rhett appeared beside her. "Not yet. Walsh hasn't presented our case. Their investigator just told everyone we're frauds. He told them what he observed. That doesn't mean he understands the truth." Rhett's voice stayed steady, but Lena could see the fear underneath. "We just need to be more convincing when we testify." "How? Everything he said was accurate. We are faking this." "Yes, but we've also built something real in the process. Focus on that." They returned to the courtroom. Walsh began calling his witnesses, Judge Morrison, who testified about the legitimate marriage documentation and legal process; Thomas Harrison, who spoke about seeing Lena and Rhett together and believing their relationship genuine; Margaret, who described their daily life at the manor and the ways they supported each other. But the most critical testimonies would be their own. Walsh called Lena first. She walked to the witness stand feeling like she was walking to an execution. Every eye in the courtroom tracked her movement. After the oath, Walsh began with gentle questions. "Mrs. Calder, how did you meet your husband?" Lena took a breath and launched into their practice story. The saddle repair work, the workshop encounter, the gradual conversations that became something more. "Why keep the marriage secret?" Walsh asked. "Because I knew how it would look. Rhett's father had just died, and there were all these contracts and obligations. I didn't want people thinking I was taking advantage of his situation. And honestly, I was scared of his world. I grew up poor, working with my hands. High society wasn't somewhere I belonged." "But you married him anyway." "Yes, because beneath all the ranch politics and money and pressure, I saw someone who was lonely and trapped and trying to do the right thing. Someone who needed a partner, not another person trying to control him." Lena met Walsh's eyes. "I married him because he was kind to me when he didn't have to be. Because he saw me as a person, not just as poor or desperate or useful. It was the truth, or close enough to it. Rhett had been those things, even if his kindness came wrapped in calculation." Walsh nodded approval. Then Pritchard stood for cross-examination, and the gentleness evaporated. "Mrs. Calder, or should I say Miss Whitmore, your family was in severe financial trouble 4 months ago, correct?" "Yes." "Facing foreclosure?" "Yes." "Desperate for money?" "Yes." Lena forced herself to maintain eye contact. "My mother had just died. My siblings needed food and medicine. I was desperate." "And Mr. Calder offered you a way out, a substantial amount of money in exchange for playing the role of his wife?" "No, he offered me partnership, support, a chance to save my family while helping him escape contracts that would have destroyed everything his grandfather built." "So you admit there was a financial transaction involved?" "I admit we helped each other. That's what marriages are supposed to be, mutual support." "How romantic." Pritchard's voice dripped sarcasm. "Tell me, Mrs. Calder, do you love your husband?" The question hung in the air. Lena's throat tightened. She looked at Rhett, sitting rigid at the defense table, and thought about the past weeks. The writing lessons and shared dinners, the quiet moments in his study, the gradual revelation of the wounded person beneath the cold exterior. "I respect him," she said carefully. "I trust him. I've seen his strength and his scars, and I choose to stand beside him. If that's not love yet, it's the foundation of it. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Love isn't always dramatic or instant. Sometimes it's built slowly through shared struggle and mutual respect. Pritchard smiled like she'd proven his point. Or sometimes it's fabricated for convenience. No further questions. Lena returned to her seat, shaking. Rhett's hand found hers briefly under the table, a moment of real support amid the performance. Then Walsh called Rhett to the stand. If Lena had felt exposed, Rhett looked like he'd rather face a firing squad, but his voice remained steady as Walsh walked him through their story. "Why marry Lena Whitmore specifically?" Walsh asked. "Because she was real. Everyone else my father wanted me to marry was more interested in the ranch than in me. They saw opportunity, not partnership. Lena saw someone struggling under impossible pressure and offered to help carry the weight. That's rare. That's valuable. But you kept the marriage secret." "But because I knew how it would be received. I knew people would call her a gold digger and accuse me of using her to escape my obligations. I wanted time to establish our relationship privately before subjecting her to public scrutiny." Rhett's voice hardened. "I was trying to protect her. Clearly, I failed." Pritchard's cross-examination was brutal. He picked apart their timeline, questioned inconsistencies and small details, pushed for evidence of genuine intimacy. "Mr. Calder, you and your supposed wife maintained separate bedrooms. Why?" "Because we both value privacy, and because our marriage began as a partnership before becoming romantic. We're still learning how to be together." "How convenient. Tell me, when did this partnership supposedly become romantic?" Rhett hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but Pritchard pounced on it. "You're hesitating because there's no good answer, is there? Because this marriage isn't romantic, it's transactional." "It's both." Rhett's voice went cold. "I won't pretend we fell in love at first sight or that this has been easy. Marriage is work, especially when you're building it under siege from people who want you to fail. But I chose Lena, and I continue choosing her every day. That's what commitment means. Or it's what a good performance looks like." Pritchard leaned closer. "Mr. Calder, isn't it true that you approached several other women before Miss Whitmore? That she was merely the most desperate option available when you needed a bride quickly?" The courtroom went silent. Lena's heart stopped. They'd never discussed this. Walsh must not have known. Rhett's expression turned to stone. "Yes, I explored other options. I needed a wife to fulfill my father's requirements, and I considered several candidates. But I chose Lena because she was the only one who understood that this wasn't about ownership. She was the only one willing to be a partner instead of a controller. So she was a last resort. She was the best option. There's a difference." Pritchard smiled victoriously. "No further questions." The damage was catastrophic. Rhett returned to his seat looking like he'd been gutted. Lena couldn't look at him. The words echoed in her head. Several other women, most desperate option, last resort. She'd known this, of course, known she wasn't his first choice, but hearing it stated plainly in open court in front of hundreds of people made the humiliation fresh and sharp. Walsh called a few more character witnesses, but the momentum had shifted. Pritchard's closing argument hammered home the key points. Separate bedrooms, convenient timing, Lena's desperate financial situation, Rhett's admission that she wasn't his first choice. "This is fraud, Your Honor. Calculated fraud designed to circumvent legitimate legal obligations. These two people barely know each other. They're performing a role, not living a marriage. And allowing this deception to stand would be a mockery of the legal system." Walsh's closing focused on the legitimate documentation and the fact that marriages could begin pragmatically and still become real. But his words felt hollow after Pritchard's assault. Morrison called for a recess to review the evidence. "I'll deliver my ruling tomorrow morning at 10. Court is adjourned." The crowd erupted into conversation. Lena stood mechanically and followed Walsh and Rhett out through a side door, avoiding the press of bodies. Outside, rain had started. Cold, driving sheets that matched her internal state. They climbed into the carriage in silence. "That went badly," Walsh said finally. "Pritchard scored significant points. Rhett, why didn't you tell me about the other women?" "Because it didn't seem relevant. I married Lena. The others don't matter." "They matter when Pritchard uses them to paint you as calculating and Lena as desperate." Walsh rubbed his face. "We'll know tomorrow. But prepare yourselves for the possibility that Morrison rules against us." The ride back to Calder Ridge felt endless. Lena stared out at the rain, her mind replaying Rhett's testimony. Last resort. Best option because she understood it wasn't about ownership. She'd sold herself for her siblings' survival. That was the truth underneath all the prettier words. At the manor, she went straight to her room without speaking. She changed out of the court dress, pulled on work clothes, and sat at her leather table with tools and materials. Her hands needed occupation before her mind tore itself apart. She'd been working for maybe an hour when a knock came at the door. "Go away, Margaret." "It's me," Rhett's voice said. Lena didn't answer, but he opened the door anyway. He changed too, no longer the severe courtroom version of himself, just exhausted and drained. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what specifically?" "There's a lot to choose from." "For the way Pritchard made it sound, like you were nothing more than a convenient solution to my problem." "Isn't that what I am?" Lena set down her tools. "You just said it yourself in court. You considered several women. I was the one who worked out. You're reducing it to the worst possible interpretation." "Am I?" "Because it seems pretty accurate." Lena stood, anger finally breaking through the numbness. "I was desperate. You needed a wife. It was transactional. Everything since then has been us trying to make the transaction look legitimate." "That's not all it's been." "Isn't it?" She crossed her arms. "Tell me honestly, if you'd known that one of your other options would eventually say yes, would you have still chosen me?" Rhett was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. But I do know that I'm glad I chose you." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." He threw her words from the witness stand back at her. "I can't change how this started. I can't make it less calculated or desperate. But I meant what I said in court. I continue choosing you. Every day since that banquet, I've chosen to be honest with you, to build something real underneath the performance. That has to count for something." "Does it? Because tomorrow Morrison might decide it doesn't count at all. He might rule that we're frauds and I end up prosecuted while you lose everything. And then what was any of this for?" "For survival, the same reason you agreed in the first place." Lena sank back into her chair. "I hate this. I hate lying to everyone. I hate not knowing what's real and what's performance. I hate that I testified today about respecting and trusting you, and I meant it, but I still don't know if you actually see me as anything more than a useful piece in your chess game." Rhett moved further into the room. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who walked through the wrong door and could have run away screaming but chose to stand and fight instead. Someone who grew up poor and desperate but didn't let it make her cruel or grasping. Someone who takes care of her siblings before herself and helps household staff even when she doesn't have to." He stopped a few feet away. "I see someone stronger than me in ways that matter. And yes, I chose you strategically at first. But I keep choosing you because of who you are, not what you can do for me." The words landed somewhere soft and vulnerable that Lena hadn't wanted to acknowledge existed. "You're better at pretty speeches than I expected. I'm not good at much besides running a ranch and surviving my father's legacy. But I'm learning." He glanced at the leather pieces on her table. "What are you making?" "A bridle. One of the ranch hands asked if I could repair his, but the leather's too worn. Easier to make a new one." "You're making equipment for my staff." "Our staff, technically. And yes, keeps my hands busy." Rhett picked up one of the pieces, examining the stitching. "This is quality work, better than what we usually use." "Thanks." They stood in awkward silence. Outside, rain continued drumming against the windows. "Regardless of what happens tomorrow," Rhett said, "I want you to know that I'll make sure you're taken care of. If I lose the ranch, you'll still get your money. Walsh has it arranged through Morrison in a protected account. Your siblings will be safe. And you? I'll figure something out. I always do." "That's not comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be true." He set down the leather piece. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult no matter how it goes." After he left, Lena sat alone in the dim room, surrounded by leather and tools and the wreckage of the day's testimony. She thought about Rhett's words, about her own testimony, about the strange partnership they'd built from desperation and necessity. Was any of it real? Or were they just two good actors who'd started believing their own performance? She didn't know. And tomorrow, a judge would decide for them. Sleep came in fitful patches. Lena kept waking to check the clock, watching hours crawl toward morning. By the time dawn arrived gray and cold, she felt hollowed out. Margaret brought breakfast, but Lena couldn't eat. She dressed in the same severe charcoal dress, let Margaret fix her hair, and went downstairs to where Rhett waited. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Ready?" "No." "Same." The courthouse was even more crowded than the day before. News had spread, and half the county had turned out to see the conclusion. Lena and Rhett pushed through the crowd with Walsh, ignoring shouted questions from onlookers. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt like a physical weight. Morrison entered promptly at 10 and called the hearing to order. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence," he said without preamble. "This case presents complicated questions about the nature of marriage, the role of pragmatism in relationships, and the line between strategic arrangement and fraud." Lena's hands clenched in her lap. Rhett sat motionless beside her. "The evidence shows that Mr. Calder and Miss Whitmore entered this union for practical reasons. Financial security on her part, legal compliance on his. The evidence also shows they maintained separate living quarters and had limited contact before their public announcement." Pritchard looked triumphant. Eleanor, sitting in the gallery, smiled. "However," Morrison continued, "the evidence also shows a legally filed marriage certificate, properly witnessed and documented. It shows two people who have, over the past weeks, worked to build a genuine partnership. It shows mutual respect, shared experiences, and a commitment to supporting one another through difficulty." The courtroom held its breath. Marriage has always been, throughout human history, a blend of pragmatism and emotion. People marry for security, for alliance, for survival. The question is whether pragmatic origins invalidate the relationship itself. I believe they do not. Morrison's voice strengthened. "What matters is not how a marriage begins, but whether the parties are committed to honoring their vows and building a genuine life together." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Based on the evidence, I find that while this marriage may have originated from strategic necessity, it has evolved into a legitimate union. Mr. Calder and Mrs. Calder have demonstrated their commitment through actions and testimony. Therefore, I rule in favor of the defendants. The marriage stands." The courtroom exploded. Pritchard shot to his feet protesting, but Morrison's gavel cracked down. "My ruling is final. Mr. Beaumont, your claim to Calder Ridge is denied. Court dismissed." Lena sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Walsh was shaking Rhett's hand, grinning. People pressed forward, some congratulating, some arguing. Through the chaos, Lena caught Eleanor's expression of pure fury. Rhett turned to her. "We need to leave, now." They fought through the crowd to the carriage. Once inside, with the door closed and the noise muffled, reality finally hit. "We won," Lena said. "Yes." Morrison ruled in our favor. "Yes. I can't believe it." "Neither can I." Rhett leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes. "I thought we were finished." The carriage rolled toward home. Lena watched rain streak the windows, her mind still catching up. They'd survived. The marriage stood. Calder Ridge was safe. But Morrison's words echoed, commitment to building a genuine life together. The marriage has evolved into a legitimate union. Had it? Or had they just convinced a judge they were better actors than they actually were? Back at the manor, staff greeted them with congratulations. Margaret had champagne waiting. The house felt lighter, like pressure had been released. That evening, after the initial celebration died down, Lena found herself alone in the library. Rhett appeared in the doorway holding 2 glasses. "Thought you might want this," he said, offering her champagne. "Thanks." He sat in the chair across from hers. They drank in silence for a moment. "So what now?" Lena asked finally. "Now we live with the consequences of winning." Rhett set down his glass. "Beaumont won't accept this quietly. Eleanor will continue making life difficult, and we still have 10 months left on our original agreement." "Right, 10 months of pretending. Is that what we're still doing? Pretending?" Lena met his eyes. "I don't know. Are we?" "I don't know either." He looked away. "Everything's tangled up now. What's real? What's performance? What started as strategy but became something else? Morrison called it a legitimate union. Morrison doesn't live here. He doesn't know what happens behind closed doors. What does happen behind closed doors?" Rhett was quiet for a long time. "We survive. We build something that might become real if we give it enough time. We honor the agreement we made while hoping it evolves into something neither of us expected. That's not very romantic." "No, but it's honest." He stood. "I'm going to bed. It's been an exhausting few days." After he left, Lena remained in the library, staring into the fireplace. They'd won the court case, but the real test was just beginning. 10 more months of navigating the space between fiction and truth, between strategic partnership and genuine connection. She wondered which would win in the end. The weeks following the court victory should have brought relief, but instead they brought something more complicated. Lena found herself trapped in a strange limbo, no longer simply performing a role, but not quite living an authentic life either. The county's reaction split down predictable lines. Some people, like the Harrisons and Judge Morrison, accepted the ruling and moved on. Others, led by Eleanor and the Beaumont faction, refused to let it rest. Whispers followed Lena everywhere. Gold digger, opportunist, the woman who conned her way into Calder wealth. "Let them talk," Rhett said one morning over breakfast. "Their opinions don't change reality. Their opinions make every social event miserable," Lena countered. "Last week at the church fundraiser, 3 women literally turned their backs when I approached." "Then stop approaching them. That's not how this works. If I retreat, they win. If I push forward, I'm aggressive in proving their point." She set down her coffee too hard, sloshing liquid onto the saucer. "There's no right move." Rhett looked up from his newspaper. "Welcome to frontier politics. Every move is wrong to someone." "That's helpful, thank you." "I'm not trying to be helpful. I'm trying to be realistic." He folded the paper. "You want comfort? Talk to Margaret. You want strategy? Talk to me." Lena stood abruptly. "Maybe I don't want either right now." She left before he could respond, heading for the stables. Writing had become her escape, the one activity where she didn't have to perform or strategize or carefully measure every word. Just her, the horse, and open country. She'd been riding for maybe an hour when she spotted another rider in the distance. As they drew closer, Lena's stomach sank. Eleanor Hastings, mounted on a gorgeous chestnut mare, wearing a riding habit that probably cost more than a ranch hand's yearly wages. "Mrs. Calder," Eleanor called out, her tone dripping false sweetness. "How unexpected." Lena considered turning around, but that felt too much like retreat. "Eleanor, out enjoying your spoils?" Eleanor guided her mare alongside Lena's horse. "Must be nice going from poverty to all this luxury practically overnight. Is there something you actually want, or are you just riding around looking for someone to insult?" Direct. How refreshingly common. Eleanor's smile turned sharp. "Actually, I wanted to tell you something. Dorian Beaumont isn't done. The court case was just the first round. Morrison ruled in our favor. It's over. Legal rulings don't change what everyone knows is true. You and Rhett are playing house, and eventually the cracks will show." Eleanor leaned closer. "When they do, I'll be there to pick up the pieces. Well, to pick up Rhett, anyway. You can go back to whatever hovel you crawled out of." Heat flooded Lena's face. "You're delusional if you think Rhett would ever want me?" "Oh, he already did. We were perfect together before you interfered. We understood each other, moved in the same circles, spoke the same language." Eleanor's voice turned venomous. "You're a temporary inconvenience, an embarrassment he'll eventually tire of. And when he does, I'll be waiting." "Keep waiting," Lena said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Because Rhett chose me. Not for breeding or connections or social position. He chose someone who sees him as a person instead of a prize. If you can't understand that, you don't know him at all." Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. "You think you're special because he picked you? You were convenient, desperate, easy to manipulate. Maybe, but I'm still here, and you're still bitter." Lena urged her horse forward. "Enjoy your ride, Eleanor." She rode away before Eleanor could respond, her heart hammering. That had been reckless, antagonizing someone who already wanted to destroy her. But it had also felt necessary, like drawing a line in the dirt and daring Eleanor to cross it. When Lena returned to the manor, she found Rhett in his study with a stack of financial ledgers. He looked up as she entered. "Good ride?" "I ran into Eleanor. She informed me that Beaumont isn't done trying to ruin us." Rhett's expression darkened. "What else did she say?" "That I'm a temporary embarrassment and she's waiting for you to come to your senses." Lena sat down across from him. "I may have told her to keep waiting. Probably not wise to provoke her. Probably not. But I'm tired of being polite to people who want me destroyed." She paused. "Is she right? About Beaumont still coming after us?" "Yes. He lost in court, but there are other ways to apply pressure. Financial manipulation, social isolation, attacking our business relationships." Rhett set down his pen. I've been reviewing the ranch accounts. Several of our regular buyers have suddenly canceled orders. Beaumont's been spreading rumors about poor cattle quality. Can he do that? He's doing it. Whether it works depends on how many people believe him versus how many trust our actual reputation. Rhett rubbed his face tiredly. We're in for a long fight. Morrison's ruling bought us legitimacy, but it didn't buy us peace. So what do? We keep running the ranch well. We maintain our public front. We outlast them. He met her eyes. That's all we can do. The conversation left Lena feeling drained. This was supposed to get easier after the court case, but instead it felt like the pressure had just shifted form. That evening, Margaret knocked on Lena's door with an unexpected message. Mrs. Calder, your sister is here, Emma. She arrived about an hour ago asking to see you. Lena's heart leaped. She hadn't seen Emma or Caleb since this entire disaster began. She rushed downstairs to find Emma waiting in the entrance hall, looking older and more serious than Lena remembered. Emma! Lena pulled her sister into a hug. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? Is Caleb? Caleb's fine. Everything's fine. Emma pulled back, examining Lena with critical 15-year-old eyes. I came because I needed to see if you were actually okay, or if you were just saying that in your letters. I'm okay. I promise. Are you? Emma glanced around the grand entrance hall. Because this is all very fancy and strange, and the stories people tell in town about you and Mr. Calder are pretty horrible. Lena's throat tightened. What kind of stories? That you trapped him into marriage for his money. That you're pretending to be something you're not. That the whole thing's a scam. Emma's voice dropped. Some people say nice things too, that you were brave to marry him, that you saved his ranch from worse people, but mostly it's mean gossip. People love mean gossip. I know, but I wanted to hear the truth from you. Emma crossed her arms. Did you marry him for money? Lena looked at her sister, sharp, perceptive Emma, who'd grown up too fast taking care of their dying mother. She deserved honesty, or as much honesty as Lena could safely give. I married him because we could help each other, Lena said carefully. His situation was complicated. Mine was desperate. We made an agreement that worked for both of us. So, yes, you married him for money. I married him for survival, for you and Caleb, for keeping our family alive. Lena touched Emma's shoulder. But it's become more complicated than that. He's not what I expected. Neither is this life. Do you love him? The question cut straight through. Lena thought about Rhett, his cold exterior and hidden wounds, his strategic mind and unexpected kindnesses. The way he'd started feeling less like a business partner and more like someone she actually wanted around. I don't know, she'd admitted, but I respect him, and I think maybe that's more important right now. Emma studied her for a long moment. Okay, but if he hurts you, Caleb and I will come defend you. We're small, but we're scrappy. Lena laughed despite everything. I'll keep that in mind. They spent the evening catching up. Emma talked about school, about Caleb's improving health, about the homestead repairs that Lena's money had made possible. It felt normal in a way nothing had felt normal for weeks. Rhett appeared during dinner and Lena watched him carefully as he interacted with Emma. He was polite, asked appropriate questions about her schooling, listened when she talked about wanting to become a teacher someday. He didn't patronize or dismiss her, which Emma clearly appreciated. Your sister's smart, Rhett said after Emma had gone to bed in one of the guest rooms. She sees through nonsense. She's had to. Life didn't give her much choice. Neither did yours. They stood in the darkened hallway outside Emma's room, speaking quietly. The house had settled into night silence, just the two of them awake. Can I ask you something? Lena said. Maybe. Eleanor said you and she were perfect together, that you understood each other. Rhett's expression hardened. Eleanor understood my bank accounts and social position. She didn't understand me. How do you know? Because she never asked about anything that didn't directly benefit her. She never wanted to know about the ranch operations or my actual interests or what I thought about beyond business strategy. He paused. She wanted the version of me that looked good at parties and signed financial documents, not the person underneath. And I want the person underneath? I don't know, do you? Lena considered the question honestly. I think I'm starting to, even though that person is complicated and frustrating and terrible at comfort. Accurate assessment. Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. For what it's worth, You're not what I expected either. Better or worse? Different. You're stubborn and defensive and completely out of your depth in high society. But you're also genuine. You don't hide what you think or pretend to be something you're not. That's refreshing. Refreshing sounds like a polite word for annoying. Sometimes it's both. They stood in the quiet hallway, and Lena became suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how the dim light softened Rhett's usually harsh features. This was the most honest conversation they'd had since the court case. No performance, no audience, just two people trying to figure out what they were to each other. I should sleep, Rhett said finally. Early meeting with the cattle buyers tomorrow. Right, good night. He walked away toward the stairs, leaving Lena in the hallway with her churning thoughts. Emma's question echoed. Do you love him? The answer should have been simple. No, this was business, strategy, survival. But the truth felt more complicated with each passing day. The next morning brought a crisis that shoved all personal complications aside. One of the ranch hands appeared at breakfast, hat in hand, looking grim. Mr. Calder, we've got a problem. Someone cut the fencing on the north pasture last night. About 50 head of cattle wandered off. Rhett was on his feet immediately. How bad? Bad enough. We're tracking them now, but the terrain's rough up there. Could take days to round them all up. Accidents happen, Lena said. The ranch hand shook his head. This wasn't an accident, ma'am. The fence was cut clean through in 3 places. Someone did this deliberately. Rhett's expression turned to ice. Beaumont. He left immediately with a group of hands to start recovery operations. Lena stayed behind, feeling useless and angry. This was escalation, moving from legal attacks and social pressure to direct sabotage. Emma found her pacing in the library. What's wrong? Someone sabotaged the ranch, cut fences, let cattle escape. Lena fought to keep her voice steady. This is my fault. If I hadn't married Rhett, if we hadn't won the court case, none of this would be happening. That's stupid logic, Emma said bluntly. Bad people doing bad things isn't your fault. It's their fault. But I made it worse. No, you gave Rhett a way to fight back against people who wanted to control him. That's not making it worse. That's standing up. Emma's voice turned fierce. You taught me and Caleb that we don't let bullies win. Don't forget your own lessons. Lena pulled her sister into a hug, grateful for the 15-year-old's clarity. Rhett returned 3 days later, exhausted and filthy. They'd recovered most of the cattle, but lost several to the rough terrain and predators. The financial hit was significant, but not devastating, unless it happened again. We're posting guards now, Rhett told Lena that evening, round the clock on all the vulnerable fence lines. It'll strain our manpower, but we can't afford another incident. Can you prove Beaumont was behind it? No. But everyone knows it was him. Rhett accepted the whiskey Lena poured him. This is how he operates. Indirect attacks that are impossible to prove in court. So he just gets away with it? Unless we catch him red-handed, which he's too smart to allow. Lena thought about Beaumont's smug face at the courthouse, about Eleanor's threats, about the constant pressure from all sides. There has to be something we can do. We survive. We adapt. We make it harder for him to hurt us. Rhett downed the whiskey. It's not satisfying, but it's reality. The sabotage incident changed something in Lena. She'd spent weeks feeling defensive, constantly reacting to attacks, but Emma's words stuck with her. Don't let bullies win. She'd fought her way through poverty and her father's violence and her mother's death. She wasn't going to surrender now. She started learning ranch operations more seriously, not just for show, but to actually understand the business. She spent time with the foreman discussing cattle management, with the bookkeeper reviewing finances, with Margaret coordinating household and worker needs. If she was going to be Lady of Calder Ridge, she might as well actually do the job. Rhett noticed. You're taking this seriously, he observed one afternoon after she'd spent 3 hours reviewing supply contracts. Someone's trying to destroy what you've built. I'm not going to just watch it happen. What we've built. Lena looked up. What? You said what I've built, but Morrison's ruling made it official. This is our ranch now, our life, our fight. Rhett met her eyes. I know that wasn't the original agreement, but circumstances change. Are you saying you want me to stay, beyond the year? I'm saying that the line between temporary arrangement and permanent partnership has gotten blurry, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Before Lena could respond, Margaret appeared with news that Judge Morrison had arrived unexpectedly and was waiting in the entrance hall. Morrison looked grave. I came to warn you. Beaumont's filed a new legal action, not against your marriage this time, but against the ranch's water rights. He's claiming that Calder Ridge has been diverting water illegally from shared sources, damaging downstream properties. That's false, Rhett said immediately. I know, but it'll tie you up in court for months, cost a fortune in legal fees, and damage your reputation with buyers. Morrison's expression turned apologetic. He's smart. He can't beat you directly, so he's trying to bleed you dry through 1,000 cuts. How do we stop him? You don't. You endure. Morrison glanced between them. But I'll tell you this. If you two can hold together through this pressure, you'll come out stronger than any couple I've seen. Beaumont's testing you. Don't let him find cracks. After Morrison left, Lena and Rhett stood in the study, surrounded by the weight of everything pressing down on them. We can fight this, Lena said. The water rights claim is false. We can prove... It doesn't matter if it's false. The process is the punishment. Rhett sank into his chair. By the time we win in court, we'll have spent thousands on lawyers, lost business relationships, and exhausted ourselves fighting. So we just give up? No, we find another way. He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. I need to show you something. He led her to his private study on the 3rd floor and pulled out a hidden drawer in his desk. Inside were ledgers she'd never seen before. These are my father's books, the real ones, not the sanitized versions shown to investors and lawyers. Rhett spread them on the desk. He kept detailed records of every questionable deal, every bribe, every threat he used to build this empire, including several involving the Beaumont family. Lena scanned the pages, seeing entries that made her stomach turn. Blackmail. Intimidation. Worse. Your father was a monster, yes, but he was also meticulous. Rhett's finger traced one particular entry. Here. 20 years ago, my father lent Beaumont's father a substantial sum to cover gambling debts. The Beaumont patriarch never repaid it. My father held that debt over the family for years, using it to prevent them from expanding their own operations. Dorian would want revenge for that. Exactly. This whole attack isn't just about Calder Ridge, it's about settling old scores. Rhett closed the ledger. But here's the thing. If these books became public, they'd destroy both families, mine and his. The illegality, the corruption, it's all documented. So why not release them? Destroy Beaumont before he destroys you. Because it would destroy everything my grandfather built before my father corrupted it. Every honest worker who depends on this ranch would suffer. Every legitimate business relationship would be tainted. Rhett met her eyes. I'd rather fight Beaumont's attacks than burn everything down to spite him. Lena understood then what she was really looking at. Not just ledgers, but a choice. Rhett could take the easy path, use his father's weapons, and become exactly what the old man had been. Or he could fight clean and risk losing everything. You're not your father, she said quietly. I'm trying not to be, but he's in here somewhere. Rhett tapped his temple. His voice, his strategies, his willingness to do anything to win. Sometimes I can't tell where he ends, and I begin. I can tell. How? Because your father would have released those ledgers already. He would have crushed Beaumont without hesitation or regret. Lena touched the closed ledger. You're still looking for another way. That's the difference. Something raw crossed Rhett's face. Gratitude, maybe, or relief at being understood. I don't know if there is another way. Then we'll find one together. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. This was no longer just about surviving a year-long arrangement. This was about actually building something, about choosing each other not out of desperation, but because they'd become partners in a fight neither could win alone. Rhett stood and moved toward her, close enough that Lena could see the exhaustion and determination in his eyes. Lena! A knock at the door interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. Margaret's voice came through. Mr. Calder, there's been another incident. The equipment shed caught fire. They rushed downstairs to find smoke billowing from one of the outbuildings. Ranch hands had formed a bucket line, fighting to contain the flames before they spread to the barn and stables. Lena grabbed a bucket and joined the line without thinking. The work was brutal, hauling water, fighting smoke and heat, working until her arms screamed. Beside her, Rhett worked just as hard, his expensive shirt ruined, face covered in soot. They saved the barn and stables. The equipment shed was a total loss, along with thousands of dollars in tools and supplies. Standing in the wreckage afterward, watching smoke drift into the dark sky. Lena felt something harden inside her. Beaumont wasn't just attacking their legal standing or financial position anymore. He was trying to break their will, to make them give up through constant assault. "He's escalating," she said. "Yes." Rhett's voice was flat with exhausted rage. "We need to hit back." "How? We don't have proof. We can't even get the sheriff to investigate properly. Beaumont has too much influence." Lena thought about the ledgers upstairs, about Eleanor's threats, about every slight and attack they'd endured. An idea formed, risky, potentially disastrous, but maybe the only way to shift the balance. "What if we don't hit back legally?" she said slowly. "What if we hit back socially? Make Beaumont and everyone supporting him look so bad that the county turns against them? How?" "I don't know yet, but there has to be a way." She looked at Rhett, this man she'd agreed to pretend to marry, and who'd somehow become essential to her life. "We're smarter than them, more motivated, and we have something they don't." "What's that?" "Nothing left to lose." Lena managed a grim smile. "That makes us dangerous." Rhett studied her for a long moment. Then something like admiration crossed his soot-stained face. "You've changed since that night you walked through the wrong door." "So have you. Maybe we've changed each other." Around them, ranch hands continued cleaning up, assessing damage, shoring up defenses against the next attack. The fight was far from over, but standing there in the smoke and ruins, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not hope exactly, but determination. They would survive this. And maybe, just maybe, they'd build something real in the process. The plan came together over 3 sleepless nights and too much coffee. Lena sat in Rhett's study surrounded by papers, mapping out social connections and pressure points like a military campaign. "We can't beat Beaumont legally," she said, marking another name on their chart, "but we can isolate him socially, make him toxic to work with." "How?" Rhett leaned over her shoulder, studying her notes. "He's been building alliances for decades, built on fear and obligation, not loyalty. People work with him because they're scared of what happens if they don't." Lena tapped the paper. "We give them an alternative. Show them that standing with us is safer than standing with him. That requires leverage we don't have." "Actually, we do." Lena pulled out the list she'd been compiling. Thomas Harrison hates Beaumont for undercutting his lumber prices 5 years ago. The Suttons pretend to be his allies, but their daughter is engaged to a rancher Beaumont tried to bankrupt last year. Judge Morrison despises him on principle. Half the county has old grievances. They just need permission to act on them. Rhett studied her work with growing interest. "You've been paying attention." "I've had to. Every social event is a minefield. I learned to track who hates who and why." She met his eyes. "Beaumont's strongest weapon is fear. We take that away by showing people he's not as powerful as he pretends." "And how do we do that without revealing my father's ledgers?" "We don't need the ledgers. We just need the truth about the sabotage." Lena's voice hardened. "Someone cut those fences. Someone started that fire. Beaumont was too careful to get caught, but his people weren't. We find proof, make it public, and let the county turn against him. That's still just our word against his. Not if we catch them doing it again." Understanding dawned in Rhett's expression. "You want to set a trap. I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves." Lena stood, pacing. "We keep the guard rotations, but make them obvious. Create a gap in coverage that looks like an oversight. Beaumont's people will see the opportunity and take it. When they do, we'll be ready." "That's risky. If it goes wrong, we're no worse off than we are now. But if it works, we get evidence that destroys Beaumont's reputation." She stopped pacing. "Unless you have a better idea?" Rhett was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a map of the ranch and started marking vulnerable points. "If we're doing this, we do it right. The north pasture is too exposed, too many escape routes. But the equipment storage by the south barn, that's contained. One way in, one way out." They spent the next hour planning. Lena felt something shift between them, the careful distance they'd maintained since the court case dissolving into genuine partnership. They were thinking together now, moving in sync, building strategy as one unit instead of 2 separate people pretending to cooperate. "This could backfire spectacularly," Rhett said finally. "Most worthwhile things can." Lena met his eyes. "But I'm tired of being attacked. Tired of reacting instead of acting. If we're going down, I'd rather go down fighting." "We're not going down." His voice carried absolute conviction. Not now. Not ever. The certainty in his tone made something warm bloom in Lena's chest. This wasn't the cold, calculating man who'd grabbed her wrist at the banquet. This was someone who'd learned to trust her, to see her as an equal, someone worth fighting beside. They implemented the trap over the next week. Rhett made a show of reassigning guards, creating an obvious gap in the patrol schedule around the south barn. He complained loudly at the general store about the financial strain of maintaining security, letting the gossip spread naturally. Meanwhile, Lena recruited help from unexpected places. She approached ranch hands she'd befriended during her leather work, asking them to volunteer for overnight surveillance. Most agreed immediately, not because Rhett ordered it, but because they'd come to respect her. That realization hit harder than Lena expected. She'd earned something here beyond fear, obligation. On the fifth night, the trap sprung. Lena woke to urgent knocking. One of the hands, a young man named Cooper, stood in her doorway looking triumphant and terrified. "Mrs. Calder, we got 'em. 3 men trying to set fire to the south barn. We caught them red-handed." Lena was dressed and downstairs in minutes. Rhett had the 3 saboteurs corralled in the barn, held at rifle point by ranch hands. All 3 wore dark clothes and masks, but one was immediately recognizable by his expensive boots and the gold watch chain visible at his collar. "Take off the masks," Rhett ordered. They complied reluctantly. 2 were hired muscle Lena didn't recognize, but the third made her heart race with vindication. Walter Sutton, son of the family who'd pretended to be Beaumont allies while secretly resenting him. "Walter," Rhett's voice could have frozen blood. "Interesting company you're keeping." "This isn't what it looks like," Walter stammered. "Really? Because it looks like you were about to commit arson on my property." Rhett moved closer. "Who sent you?" "Nobody sent us. We were just—" "Don't lie to me." Rhett's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I've already sent Cooper to fetch the sheriff. You've got maybe 20 minutes to decide whether you want to protect whoever hired you or protect yourself. Choose carefully." Walter's face went pale. The other 2 men exchanged panicked looks. Lena watched the calculation happen in real time. Loyalty to Beaumont versus self-preservation. "He'll destroy us if we talk," one of the hired men said. "I'll destroy you if you don't," Rhett countered. "At least Beaumont does it slowly. I can make your lives hell starting tonight. Your families, your businesses, your reputations, all gone by morning. Or you can talk, testify, and I'll make sure you walk away from this with nothing worse than damaged pride." It took 10 minutes for Walter to break. Once he started talking, the words tumbled out. Beaumont had hired them for both the fence cutting and the fire. He'd paid well and promised protection. He'd also threatened their families if they refused. "He said you'd never prove anything," Walter said miserably. "That even if we got caught, his lawyers would make sure nothing stuck." "He underestimated my wife," Rhett said simply. By the time Sheriff Davies arrived, they had full confessions. The sheriff, a practical man who'd been trying to investigate Beaumont for years without success, looked like he'd been handed a gift. "This is solid evidence, Calder, enough to bring formal charges." Davies secured the 3 saboteurs. "Beaumont's going to fight this hard." "Let him fight," Lena said. "We've got the truth on our side now." News of the arrest spread through the county like wildfire. By morning, half the town knew that Beaumont had been caught orchestrating sabotage. The other half knew by noon. The social fallout was immediate and brutal. Business partners started distancing themselves. Families who'd supported Beaumont out of fear suddenly found their courage. Even Eleanor went quiet, retreating from public view. But Beaumont himself wasn't done. 3 days after the arrest, he appeared at Calder Ridge unannounced, demanding to see Rhett. Lena watched from the study window as Beaumont climbed out of his carriage, face twisted with rage. She moved to intercept him at the door. "You need to leave," she said firmly. "I need to speak with your husband about this farce of a—" "He's not interested in speaking with you. Neither am I." Lena stood her ground despite Beaumont's intimidating presence. "You've been caught. Your people confessed. It's over." "Nothing's over until I say it is." Beaumont stepped closer, trying to use his size to frighten her. "You think one lucky break changes anything? I've been playing this game since before you could walk. I will bury both of you." "No, you won't." Rhett's voice came from behind Lena. He moved to stand beside her, with her, not in front of her. "Your reputation is destroyed, Dorian. Your allies are abandoning you. The county knows you're behind the sabotage, and more importantly, they know you got caught." Accusations aren't convictions. Maybe not, but they're enough to make you toxic. Who's going to do business with a man who burns his competitor's property? Who's going to trust you? Rhett's voice stayed level. You've lost. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left. Beaumont's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Lena thought he might actually throw a punch, but then his shoulders sagged slightly, and she saw the exact moment he realized Rhett was right. This isn't finished, Beaumont said, but the words lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Lena spoke quietly but firmly. You tried to destroy us because we wouldn't let you control us. But we're still standing, and you're the one facing criminal charges. That's not luck. That's consequence. Beaumont looked at her with pure hatred. You've ruined everything. That ranch should have been mine. The ranch was never yours to take, Rhett said. My grandfather built it honestly. My father corrupted it. I'm trying to restore it. You were just an obstacle in the way of progress. Beaumont left without another word. Lena watched his carriage disappear down the drive and felt something release in her chest. Not relief exactly, but resolution. The worst was over. The trial happened 6 weeks later. Walter Sutton and the other 2 saboteurs testified against Beaumont in exchange for reduced sentences. The evidence was overwhelming. Beaumont was convicted of conspiracy to commit arson and criminal sabotage, sentenced to 5 years in prison and massive fines. Eleanor Hastings left the county entirely, moving east to family holdings where the scandal couldn't follow her quite as closely. The social structure that had been so hostile to Lena began to shift. People who'd shunned her suddenly eager to make amends now that Beaumont's faction had collapsed. It's amazing how quickly people forget they hated you when you win, Lena observed at a county dinner a month after the trial. Welcome to frontier politics, Rhett said. Loyalty follows power. That's depressing. That's reality. But not everyone's like that. He nodded toward the Harrisons and Judge Morrison, who'd supported them consistently throughout. Some people have actual principles. Lena thought about the staff who'd volunteered to help catch the saboteurs, about Margaret, who'd supported her from the beginning, about Emma's fierce loyalty. You're right, some people do. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah Harrison, who swept over with questions about Lena's plans for the upcoming Harvest Social. Lena answered automatically, her mind elsewhere. Later, when they were alone in the carriage heading home, Rhett spoke quietly. We did it. We actually survived. Yeah. Lena looked out at the darkening landscape. Though I'm not sure what we survived into. What do you mean? I mean, our original agreement was 1 year. We've got about 2 months left on that timeline. She forced herself to look at him. What happens then? Rhett was silent for a long moment. That depends on what you want to happen. I asked you first. Lena. No, seriously. When I walked through that door 8 months ago, this was supposed to be temporary. A business arrangement. 1 year of pretending, then I take my money and disappear. Her voice caught slightly. But nothing about this feels temporary anymore. And I need to know if that's just me, or if you feel it too. The carriage rolled on through the darkness. Rhett stared out the window, jaw tight. I feel it too, he said finally, but I don't know what to do about it. Why not? Because I entered this coldly, strategically. I chose you because you were convenient and desperate and unlikely to demand more than I could give. He looked at her then, something raw in his expression. But you demanded more anyway. Not intentionally, just by being yourself. By being stubborn and genuine and refusing to let me stay closed off. You made this real when I'd planned to keep it fake. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I've spent my entire life protecting myself from genuine connection because everyone who got close either wanted to use me or control me. My father made sure I learned that lesson thoroughly. His hands clenched. You were supposed to be safe because it was temporary, but now it's not temporary, and I don't know how to trust that I won't hurt you, Lena finished quietly. Yes, she understood then what she was really asking of him. To believe that this partnership they'd built from desperation and strategy had become something worth keeping. To risk opening himself to the possibility of genuine love after spending a lifetime learning that vulnerability meant destruction. I can't promise I won't hurt you, Lena said. People hurt each other. That's part of being close to someone. But I can promise I won't use you, won't try to control you, won't see you as a prize to be won or a bank account to exploit. She reached across the carriage to take his hand. I can promise to keep choosing you, the same way you've been choosing me. That's all anyone can promise. Rhett's fingers tightened around hers. What if it's not enough? Then we figure it out together. That's what partners do. They rode the rest of the way in silence, hands linked, both of them processing what had just been acknowledged. The carriage pulled up to Calder Ridge, and they climbed out into cool evening air. Instead of heading inside immediately, Rhett turned to her. I need to show you something. He led her to the North Pasture overlook, where they'd ridden together months ago during those first awkward attempts at building shared memories. The view stretched for miles, ranch land rolling toward mountains, the last light painting everything gold and purple. This is what I'm actually fighting for, Rhett said quietly. Not the money or status or power. Just this. Land that my grandfather loved, that my father corrupted, that I'm trying to make into something better. He glanced at her. I thought I had to do it alone. Thought letting anyone close would mean surrendering control. But you've been helping me build something better, and I didn't even realize it was happening. What are we building? A life. A real one. Not the performance we started with, but something genuine. He turned to face her fully. I'm asking you to stay, not because of the agreement or the money or any strategic reason, but because somewhere in all this chaos, you became essential, and I don't want to know what my life looks like without you in it. Lena's throat tightened. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me, and it's still wrapped in practicality. I'm not good at romance. I'm good at honesty. He touched her face gently. So here's the honest truth. I love you. I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between that disaster of a banquet and tonight, you stopped being a convenient solution and became the person I want beside me for everything. Forever, if you'll have me. The words hit Lena like a physical force. You love me? Yes. Inconveniently, completely, terrifyingly. His thumb brushed her cheek. Can you keep... Lena kissed him before he could finish the question. Not gently, not carefully, but with all the pent-up emotion from 8 months of pretending, protecting, and gradually falling for someone she'd never meant to fall for at all. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Rhett rested his forehead against hers. I'll take that as a yes, he said. That's a yes, Lena confirmed. To staying, to building something real, to loving you back even though you're terrible at comfort and you think strategy is romantic. It is romantic. Good strategy keeps people safe. See? Terrible at this. But she was smiling, and Rhett was smiling back, and for the first time since walking through that wrong door, Lena felt like she'd finally walked into the right place. They stood on the overlook as night settled in fully, wrapped around each other, no longer performing for anyone but themselves. The ranch spread out below them, their ranch now, truly and completely. Built on desperation, yes, but transformed into something neither of them had expected to find. The next 2 months passed differently than the previous 8. There was no more pretending, no more careful distance. Rhett moved his things into the blue suite, and they learned how to share space honestly. They fought sometimes, about money, about ranch decisions, about Rhett's tendency to work himself to exhaustion, and Lena's habit of making decisions without consultation. But they also laughed, worked together seamlessly, and built the kind of partnership that wasn't about performance or strategy, but genuine compatibility. Emma and Caleb visited regularly. Margaret smiled more. The ranch prospered without Beaumont's interference. And slowly, carefully, Lena and Rhett built the kind of life that neither had imagined possible 8 months earlier. When the 1-year anniversary of their courthouse marriage arrived, they had a small celebration, just family and close friends. Judge Morrison raised a glass in toast. To the couple who proved that sometimes the best marriages start with the worst circumstances, he said, may you continue building something extraordinary. Later, alone in their room, Lena pulled out the contract they'd signed a year earlier. We should probably destroy this. It's not relevant anymore. Keep it, Rhett said. Reminder of where we started. Why would we want to remember that? Because it makes where we are now more meaningful. He pulled her close. We started with nothing but desperation and strategy. We built everything else from there. That's not something to forget. It's something to be proud of. Lena looked at the man who'd grabbed her wrist at a banquet and claimed she was his wife. The man who'd been cold and calculating and desperate enough to forge marriage documents. The man who'd slowly revealed himself to be wounded, fierce, and capable of genuine love despite everything his father had done to destroy that capacity. I walked through the wrong door, she said quietly. And it was the best mistake I ever made. Rhett kissed her then, gentle and thorough, and Lena let herself sink into it. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, broke, desperate, terrified of what would happen to her siblings. That girl had agreed to a fake marriage out of survival instinct, expecting nothing but money and misery. She'd gotten so much more. Years later, people across the county still told the story of Lena Whitmore and Rhett Calder, how she'd crashed a banquet and he'd claimed her as his wife on pure impulse, how they'd survived court battles and sabotage and society's cruelty, how they'd built something real from the most calculated of beginnings. The story got embellished over time, turned into frontier legend, but the truth underneath remained solid. Two desperate people had made a choice to survive together, and in choosing survival, they'd accidentally chosen love. Calder Ridge prospered under their joint leadership. Lena established a training program for leather workers, hiring young people from struggling families and teaching them a trade. Rhett implemented fair labor practices that made the ranch a desirable place to work. Together, they transformed what had been an empire built on fear into a community built on respect. Emma became a teacher, just as she'd dreamed. Caleb grew strong and healthy, eventually taking a position managing the ranch's horse breeding program. The homestead that had nearly been lost to foreclosure became a refuge for families struggling the way the Whitmores once had. And every year on the anniversary of that disastrous banquet, Lena and Rhett would raise a glass to the wrong door, the desperate lie, and the unexpected love that had saved them both. Because sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes strategic calculation transforms into genuine emotion. And sometimes two people who should never have worked together become exactly what the other needed all along. Lena learned that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and choosing to fight anyway. That love wasn't always dramatic or instant, but could be built slowly through shared struggle and mutual respect. That being chosen, truly chosen, was worth more than any amount of money or status. And Rhett learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that letting someone see his wounds didn't mean they'd exploit them, that the control he'd fought so hard to maintain was less valuable than the partnership he'd accidentally built with the stubborn leather worker who'd walked through the wrong door. They never forgot where they'd started. The desperation, the lies, the performance. But they also never regretted it. Because those first desperate choices had led them here, to a life neither could have imagined, built together one honest day at a time. The ranch stood strong. The family grew. And two people who'd started as strangers using each other to survive became something far more valuable. Partners, lovers, and proof that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings. Not because they were perfect, but because they chose each other every single day and refused to let fear or circumstance or anyone else's cruelty determine what they could build together. That was the real story underneath all the legends. Not romance at first sight or destiny or fate. Just two people making a choice, then making it again, then making it every day until the choice became their life. And that, Lena thought years later while watching sunset paint the ranch gold, was better than any fairy tale. Because it was real. Hard-won, imperfect, and absolutely real. The kind of love worth fighting for. The kind of partnership worth building. The kind of life worth living. One honest choice at a time,